It's time for our 12-team head-to-head points listener league draft. Welcome into Fantasy Baseball today. Frank Stampfl joined by Scott White and Chris Towers. Today will be a two-part podcast that will cover the entire draft and then recap our teams in part two of today's podcast. Before we get started, make sure to like this video and subscribe if you haven't already. And if you're listening on the audio side, please download, follow, and leave a 5-star review. We really do appreciate it. If you missed any of our recent content, make sure to go back and listen on demand. We broke down all of the Jose Altuve and Vaughn Grissom news on the latest podcasts. Well, Scotty, thank your lucky stars because you have the first overall pick in tonight's draft.
Yeah, so that makes two drafts in a row that we've recorded here where I have the number one overall pick.
Must be nice.
Yeah. Well, I don't know whether to thank you or curse you for this, because if you'll remember the way that mock went, I took Judge number one, and Arenado didn't make it back to me in round two, and I was tilting the whole draft because I couldn't get a third baseman at a reasonable price. And considering this group is, comprised of people who hang on our every word, who've been hearing me hammer home the point that you can't skimp on third base early, I think the chances of Arenado making it back to me are virtually zero in round two. And I gave some thought to taking Jose Ramirez because of that, but no, I'm not. I'm going to take Judge, and we'll see. We'll see what happens at third base. Maybe I'll pull out a surprise. You never know. You never know with me.
Chris, every podcast we do is fun, obviously, but I think tonight will be extra special because we've got the WBC game going on, USA versus Japan. It's the final. USA is down right now, and you and I are donning
the
red
go, baby.
And orange of the Miami Marlins. Let's go.
305 in the house. What's up?
So I'm just noticing,
stand up.
You have different generation shirts. They're orange, but they're the different.
Oh, no, mine is red.
Frank's is like bright red. I don't know why they look so similar on screen.
Okay,
yeah.
so you have the second generation Marlins font there, Chris, and Frank has third generation. You guys are
I've got
trying
the
to get
ugliest one possible.
Grab my first generation Marlins hat, and we'd really be representing. But alas, I did not.
And we begged Scott to do it, and he just wouldn't do it.
Yeah,
True story. He said his hair looked really good, so he didn't want to mess it up. Let's actually preview tonight's draft. This is the listener league that we chose these submissions for last Friday. So it's a 12-team league, randomized the draft order. Scott will be drafting first overall. Chris is 7th, and I will be picking 8th. So back-to-back picks, hopefully some fireworks between Chris and myself. Standard CBS head-to-head points lineups, one of each infield position, 3 outfielders, 1 utility bat, no corner or middle infielder. We've got 5 starting pitchers and 2 relief pitchers, 5 bench spots. So it is a shallower league than I think most people might be used to. And I won't go through the entire point system, but hitters lose half a point for strikeouts. So plate discipline matters a lot in this format. Pitchers earn 3 points per inning pitched and 7 points for a win, 7 points for a save, 3 points for a quality start, and -5 for a loss. I would say that we've previewed this thing enough, Scotty. Let's get it started. You are on the clock with the first overall pick.
Yeah. And as I already explained, I'm going to take Judge. But get ready for a lot of tilting from all of us in this particular draft, because as I said, the recent history of the podcast league is that the listeners just take all our favorite players like 3 rounds before we're used to seeing them go. And so we have to, it ends up being an uncomfortable draft for us because our teams are unfamiliar to us. And I'm going to try and just roll with it, do what I did in the Tout Wars draft and just take the value that comes to me, not obsess over getting my guys. But that's easier said than done. I'm happy to start with Judge, who in this format, like every other, was far and away the best player last year. I think in points leagues, it's even clear that he's number one, though, because obviously you don't have to sell out for stolen bases the same way you do in a roto league.
All right, so Scott takes Aaron Judge, and unsurprisingly, if he were completely healthy, I would agree with this Juan Soto pick, but the latest news that we have is that he is going for an MRI. That doesn't sound too good. MRI on this oblique injury. You know, I was wondering if he fell to me at 7 or 8 well, you at 7, Chris, or me at 8. I don't know. I might have passed just because I don't really know what's going on with Juan Soto right now. Chris, what are you thinking with him?
Yeah, no, that's fair. I think the concern at this point is not that it's like a serious injury that's going to cost him a month to start the season, but just that like there's going to be pressure with the season starting in 8 days to 9 days to push through any kind of issue. And that's a little worrisome just because it is an oblique. Even if it's a minor one, it's the kind of injury that like you need to get completely past in order to really have a chance. Otherwise, you run the risk of a setback at all times with that injury.
All right. Well, Terry Gensler, who made the pick of Juan Soto second overall, says in the chat, Kevin Acey, who covers the Padres, says the team does not seem concerned. We'll see what happens with Juan Soto. The latest picks, Jose Ramirez went third overall. Mookie Betts went fourth. Mike Trout, fifth overall. All right. So maybe a little WBC bump there for Mike Trout. Then Julio Rodriguez and Chris, you select Ronald Acuna.
Yeah, who is my number 1 player in Roto. He's my number 4 player in this format. I think he's a great pick there. I think he's gotten kind of a rep for being a better Roto player than a head-to-head points league player, and that might be true, but Ronald Acuna in 2020, which was a shortened season, he walked like 18% of the time. I think the following season it was still in like the 12 to 13% range. So if he's right, like if I'm right about Ronald Acuna being the best player in Roto, he's probably going to be close to one of the best players in head-to-head points as well. Yeah, 14% of the time in 2021. It fell to 10% in 2022, which is still very good. So I'm happy to get Ronald Acuna in pretty much any format.
Yeah, and I don't want to dump on Mike Trout at 5th overall because this is his superior format, again, where you don't have to worry about stolen bases. Of course, he's typically been an excellent plate discipline guy. Even last year when his plate discipline was down a bit, Trout had the 4th highest point per game average at this position last year, 3.64, versus Julio Rodriguez was at 3.31. I still take Julio Rodriguez over Trout in this format, but not by much.
All right, so Chris took Ronald Acuna. I was on the clock and I was debating Trey Turner or Kyle Tucker. We talk about this a lot. When you're faced with the decision of taking Trey Turner in the first round, means you've probably got to pass up on some really awesome shortstops later on in the draft. But man, I mean, he's looked so good in spring training, in the WBC. We know he's a fantastic player regardless, but I think 8th overall, even in a points league, even being shortstop, got to end the skid there. So I take Trey Turner at 8. And then at number 9, we see Kyle Tucker. And 10th overall, we see Manny Machado. We are coming up on the turn here. And Kyle's team name is the Church of Scott White. So
I was just thinking, we haven't seen a pitcher yet go first round of a points league. But I'm pretty sure someone whose name is Church of Scott White is not taking a pitcher. He does take Freddie Freeman, which is not something so he didn't take an outfielder. He didn't take a third baseman. We'll get a third baseman on. I'm predicting Church of Scott White guy will get a third baseman on the way back in round 2. Freddie Freeman, of course, a great head-to-head points player, even if he doesn't fill a weak position.
Scott, stop trying to speak these picks into existence because maybe I want a third baseman. Come on, man.
I know our listeners, and I know what we've said. So,
and that's one thing to keep in mind with this league that we're about to draft in particular. It's something we talk about a lot, but we're about at that point where you can kind of throw ADP out the window. People are going to go get their guys, and especially in a league like this, with people who listen to the podcast, people who are diehards for fantasy baseball, they're probably going to go get their guys. We're going to see some picks that aren't going to line up with the rankings or the ADP necessarily, and that's fine.
Finishing up round 1, we saw Freddie Freeman at 11, Yordan Alvarez at 12, Rafael Devers with the first pick of round 2. Chris, if Yordan Alvarez was completely healthy and we didn't have any questions, I mean, I doubt he would have even made it to either of us, but did you have any consideration of taking Yordan Alvarez?
Yeah, I think I would have taken him if Ronald Acuna and Trey Turner weren't there, but both of them were there, so I have them ranked ahead of Yordan Alvarez. But he is still 6th for me in points, just because I do think, yes, I have the concerns about health with him and Juan Soto, but I do think there's a gap between those two guys and Julio Rodriguez and Kyle Tucker, who are the next up in a points league.
Well, look what you did, Scott. You spoke it into existence. You said that the Church of Scott White will likely take a third baseman, and that's exactly what happened. So it looks like I will not be getting one of those elite names, and I won't be getting Nolan Arenado either. So the next couple of picks in round 2 after Devers, Austin Riley, Sandy Alcantara, first starting pitcher off the board. This is a head-to-head points league. You get points for innings pitched. So I think Sandy Alcantara is the odds-on favorite to lead baseball in innings once again. And then Nolan Arenado goes 16th overall. The team name is Lenars' Newt Bars. So maybe a Cardinals fan. That's what I'm wondering here. I could be the second team to take a starting pitcher. This is a head-to-head points league. First base is really deep, but I don't think I could let him go. So I'm going to go ahead and take Vladimir Guerrero. I'll start my team with two of the deepest positions at shortstop and Vladimir Guerrero, but I think both were just great values where I'm getting them. So to get Trey Turner at 8 and then Vladimir Guerrero at 17, I love starting my team with those two picks in a head-to-head points league. And Chris, you are on the clock.
And you know who it's going to be.
I know exactly.
Yes.
Once I didn't take him, I knew exactly.
It's the guy I take in the second round every time, no matter where I'm picking in the second round. If he's there, right. It's Fernando Tatis. I will have to find a shortstop replacement for the first 20 days of the season. But after that, it's all systems go, baby. He's going to have an awesome season.
All right. So no surprises with Chris taking Fernando Tatis at 18 overall. Again, there's only been one starting pitcher taken, and that was Sandy Alcantara. Scott, what are your latest thoughts on Yordan Alvarez? It sounds like he could play in a game this upcoming weekend. And do you think he should have went earlier than 12 overall in this format?
I'm not sure exactly where I have him ranked. I actually do have like Sandy Alcantara in round 1, as much as I'm not in favor of taking a starting pitcher this year. So it's possible. Let me get my rankings up. Like Alvarez is better in this form. Basically, any early round pick who isn't a big base stealer is probably going to be more valuable in this format than standard 5x5. So I know I'd take Alvarez earlier than 12th and 5x5. I'd probably take him earlier in this format too. He is one of the 3 outfielders who averaged more points per game last year than Mike Trout. In fact, he was second only to Aaron Judge, a distant second because everybody was a distant second, but Alvarez was the second best outfielder on a per game basis in this format last year. Oh, geez, look what just happened.
Whoa.
I was thinking of doing that myself. I was going to do it.
Well, let's talk about what's actually happening, because after Chris took Fernando Tatis, Bobby Witt Jr. goes off the board, maybe a little bit early in a head-to-head points league. But if you want to prevent Scott from getting a third baseman, then you got to do it there. Garrett Cole goes 20th overall. Alex Bregman, 21st overall in the second round. There's no doubt that it's early, but this is his best format. I mean, Bregman, more walks and strikeouts last year. He plays a ton of games. He's in a great lineup. The counting stats should be really good again. And Scott said he was considering it, so it's not great.
I was thinking, okay, maybe Shohei Ohtani is going to make it to me just because he's utility only.
No, don't do it. Terry,
and
take Shohei Ohtani so Scott can get him.
No, he could take him. That's fine. But Ohtani averaged 3.18 points per game as a hitter last year in this format. Bregman was 3.19. He was actually better. So why am I going to mess around at third base and risk getting a total scrub there? He doesn't take Ohtani.
Now you got yourself a little bit of a decision point here, Scotty.
I mean, it's not that tough of a decision, right? It's Shohei Ohtani. You take him.
It should be, but this is probably his worst format. Head-to-head points league where the steals don't matter and you can't reap all of his benefits. You either have to choose to use him as a utility bat or a starting pitcher each week.
And you're almost certainly going to use him as a hitter because there might be an occasion or two where he gets 2 starts, because it sounds like they're going to go with what they did down the stretch last year where they use a 6-man rotation, but he's going to pitch every 6th day. You know, if there's an off day, he's still going to stay on schedule from what I understand. So like he'll have a couple of 2-start weeks, but for the most part, he's a hitter here.
Yeah. And I am going to take him with that plan, but because this is a league where we only start 9 hitters, there's only that one utility spot. Having the ability to shift him at starting pitcher if I wind up with a hitting surplus is a nice luxury, even if it's not the ideal place to use him. And I am going to pair him with Paul Goldschmidt, who was the best first baseman in terms of head-to-head points per game last year. Hopefully he'll follow up on that this year. 3.79 points per game for him, 3.72 for Freddie Freeman, and third place was Pete Alonso, 3.49, quite a bit of a ways back.
All right, so Scott winds up with Shohei Ohtani with the last pick of round 2. Paul Goldschmidt, first pick of round 3. Again, Aaron Nola went 23rd overall, the 11th pick of round 2. And we're going to keep things moving here.
Speaking of, by the way, for the live audience, I don't want to tell you to not watch our stream. Shohei Ohtani is apparently about to pitch in the World Baseball Classic in the next inning. So,
gosh, and USA has their work cut out for them. They're down 3-1, and now you're gonna have to face one of the toughest pitchers on the planet in Ohtani. So, I don't know. It's kind of a tough spot. It's fun having these things go at the same time. If we just start freaking out at some point, it's either because of a pick or something crazy going on in this WBC game.
By the way, it was fairly amazing that Corbin Burns made it to the 22nd pick of a head-to-head points draft. I think that's the sort of thing that would only happen in a listeners league like this. Like he's probably a first rounder in most points leagues.
Yeah, it seems like a good number of these players in this league, Scott, are part of the Church of Scott White, waiting on starting pitching.
And although the exception, Framber Valdez just went 26th overall. Not the same team that just took Corbin Burns. They took Aaron Nola, but that kind of sounds like a reach. I mean, it definitely sounds like a reach. His ADP is much later than that. Framber Valdez had 43 more fantasy points last season than Aaron Nola. Like he was actually excellent in this league because you get bonuses for quality starts, and he had 27 of them last year. He
had the second. He was somebody had to be second to Sandy Alcantara in innings and complete games, and that somebody in both of those categories was Framber Valdez.
I think Framber Valdez actually outscored. Yeah, he outscored Corbin Burns in this format by a half a point, but still outscored him.
Yeah. So it was somebody who clearly is paying close attention to the scoring format and, singling out Framber Valdez as a specialist for it, which is fine. I mean, that's going to happen sometimes. I wouldn't take him over Justin Verlander, who now goes 2 picks later. I wouldn't take him over Max Scherzer or Brandon Woodruff, but if
he outscores those guys, I wouldn't be surprised.
Right. Exactly. That's part of the reason why I don't want to invest in a true ace, is because you get enough of these like Framber Valdez types who can close the gap more than you think.
All right. Well, I've got to ask the chat a little question here and see what's going on, because the reason is Pete Alonso went at 27th overall, Justin Verlander, Jacob deGrom, and then at 30th overall, Dustin May. I don't know if that is
get your guys, Chris said. Go get him.
I mean, I know Chris likes him, but you didn't have to worry about him taking him in round 3 or 4. All right. Well, did mean that pick. Chris, you're on the clock, and you won't be getting Dustin May this draft. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. That would have been a good one 10 rounds from now. Get your guys. Yeah, I'm going to go. I would prefer to have Bo Bichette to Marcus Semien. I have him ranked higher. Semien has actually been better each of the past 2 seasons in this format for what it's worth. But because I already have Fernando Tatis, he's shortstop eligible. I may end up using him as in the outfield, but I don't want to, double up on a position that early. So I do take Marcus Semien, who, this team could get off to a slow start between Marcus Semien's, possibly likely struggles in April as a result of the deadened ball and the humidor and all that stuff we saw last year. And, no Fernando Tatis until April 20th. So, we'll see what happens.
Well, thank you, Chris, because I am ecstatic to get Max Scherzer at the end of the 3rd round. I thought you might have taken him because I know you like the old Metsies up there, Max Scherzer and Justin Verlander. So I know typically wait a little bit longer on pitching, but head-to-head points league, I still want at least one ace on my team, and see what happens here with the next pick. I was going to think about taking Spencer Strider because he does have relief pitcher eligibility in this format. So he's kind of a cheat code. He is far and away the best spark. We talk about that often. That's a starting pitcher as relief pitcher. And it is a cheat code in a head-to-head points league if you play on CBS, because you can use Spencer Strider as a relief pitcher.
I was thinking about him at the turn. If Terrence Gensler before my pick, if he had taken Ohtani, I might have gone with Goldschmidt and Strider there instead of Ohtani and Goldschmidt.
Okay, well, would you have taken Strider over Scherzer, Scott? Because I thought about it, but
yeah, I would have.
Yeah,
just for team building purposes. I know I don't rank well. I moved Scherzer down a little bit.
Why is that?
I do have Scherzer technically one spot ahead of Strider in my rankings. Just kind of gaming my rankings a little bit. You know, I talked throughout the off season and early in draft prep. Oh, I have Justin Verlander and Max Scherzer 1 and 2, and I kind of wanted to hold to it on principle, but like a number of starting pitchers go off the board before you need to consider taking Verlander and Scherzer, and so I didn't want to see them overdrafted at my behest because of where I put them in my rankings, if that makes sense. So it had nothing to do with Scherzer himself. It's just thinking strategically through my rankings.
All right. After Spencer Strider went Bo Bichette at 34th overall and Zach Wheeler. I know we've heard some good things about Bo Bichette this spring. A lot of his teammates talking about how great he looks and how he could get back on track this year. No doubt it was a letdown season for Bo Bichette last year, but had a huge September, and hopefully that's something that can carry over into this season.
Yeah, that's a great pick. Getting Bo Bichette at 34 is awesome. I like I said, I considered him at 31, so the fact that he fell a couple more spots, that worked out really well for who was that? Team Peanut Butter Jelly Time.
With the final pick of round 3, you know who it is.
Here comes the money.
Here we go. Money talk.
Here comes the money.
Shane McClanahan, who for most of the offseason I was pretty worried about with the shoulder injury. He's looked good in the spring. The velocity has been fine. So, you know, I'm feeling a little bit better. I still haven't drafted him anywhere. So I've got, I think after today, 4 more drafts left. We'll see if I can wind up with 1 share of Shane McClanahan. The confidence is growing there. Then the first pick of round 4. I think in a head-to-head points league, I don't really have a problem with this. It's Corey Seager going 37th overall. Scott Francisco Lindor still on the board. What do you think about Seager versus Lindor in this format?
Yeah, I think it's closer than a lot of people would think it is. I do have Lindor 1 spot ahead of Seager, but it's the kind of situation where I would probably pass up Lindor and hope Seager makes it back to me. I don't think obviously I wouldn't just take Seager ahead of Lindor because I rank Lindor ahead, but it's close enough that I don't have a big problem with it.
Okay, Luis Robert with the next pick at 38th overall. I am up in 2 picks and got to take a break eventually. I got to do a promo read here too, but I don't want to get caught in the middle of my read while I'm making a draft pick. So we'll just talk it through until these picks are made.
How about this one? I'm considering with my next pick someone that I haven't taken yet this spring.
Wow.
Can you guys, I want to know if you guys can guess who it is.
I don't think I can guess who it is. I haven't been to all of your drafts, Chris.
I'm starting to get a little FOMO on this guy based on what we've seen in the spring.
Okay. All right.
I'm kind of upset.
And I'm not sure if he's going to still be there.
Maximilian Fried?
Not that guy.
My Q just got wiped out here.
Oh.
I was looking at Woodruff and Schwarber. They both went the picks before me. Now I'm on the clock. Actually pretty happy that I took Max Scherzer there because if I didn't get one of him or Woodruff, I would have been pretty upset. I've got 30 seconds left. I could use an outfielder, and one of Chris's favorite players is still there. He's very good in this format. Thinking about taking him. Looking at a few other positions, and I think I am going to go that route. I'm going to go ahead and take George Springer here at 41st overall. Really good plate discipline. Typically leading off for the Blue Jays, should get a ton of plate appearances. And with that, we're going to take a quick break. And when we return, we'll find out who Chris was talking about here on Fantasy Baseball Today.
Golf's biggest stars descend on Oak Hill for one unforgettable major. The PGA Championship coming in May to CBS.
Thursday at 7:15 Eastern on CBS, we head to the Sweet 16 at the NCAA Men's College Basketball Championship, beginning with Arkansas taking on UConn, followed by a huge showdown between UCLA and Gonzaga. Then on Friday night, Miami faces top-seeded Houston, and Xavier meets Texas. Our coverage continues with 2 more games on Sunday at 2 Eastern, with the winners punching their ticket to the Final Four. March Madness continues this week on CBS. And Chris, a player you were referencing is blank.
Matt Olson, who has just been absolutely crushing the ball this spring, which, look, Matt Olson goes through stretches where he absolutely crushes the ball. He's got, 5 home runs in spring, like a 1,400 OPS or something. He's been absolutely ridiculous. He's not someone that I've drafted. I typically wait a little longer at first base. But I decided, like I said, a little bit of FOMO here about, what if we do get the big Matt Olson bounce back? He only had 477 points in this format, 564 in 2021. Guys often perform better the second season that they're in a new league. So gonna take that opportunity to get Matt Olson on one of my squads this year.
I don't want to overreact to spring training numbers, especially for a veteran like this, Chris, but I am starting to feel the same thing on Matt Olson. You could just talk yourself into, okay, it was his first year in Atlanta. He's filling the shoes of a legend on that team and Freddie Freeman. He was still pretty good last year, but I think for most standards, it was a bit of a down year for Matt Olson.
Yeah.
He's looked fantastic this spring. So just wouldn't surprise me if, he hits 40 plus homers this year, some massive counting stats, and he does walk a lot, which matters in this format.
Yep.
Go ahead, Chris.
Oh no, that was it. Although before we move on.
Yes.
Watch CBS Sports HQ at 3 p.m. on Wednesday afternoon.
Yes.
You'll see these 3 beautiful faces. A
Yes.
little Fantasy Baseball Today draft special.
Yes. You see, you're a better host than I am, Chris, because I probably should have mentioned that sooner. After Chris took Matt Olson, Francisco Lindor, Max Fried, Ozzy Albies, Michael Harris, Alek Manoah, Chris, Scott, you're on the clock with 5 seconds.
Yep. Okay. So, I was thinking about Albies, obviously, in the end of round 4. Yeah, I like filling second base with one of those high-end second basemen. He's gone. Michael Harris was still hanging around for a long time, but he went 2 picks before mine. So I'm looking at my situation now. Francisco Lindor's gone. I'm going to have a second-tier shortstop. I'm going to have a lower-tier second baseman. I'm going to have issues at third base. I'm going to go ahead and take JT Realmuto. I don't like taking the top catcher in a 1-catcher league because I find Sean Murphy and William Contreras, the value tends to be great. But Realmuto in this scoring format is going to give me a clear advantage. I think. Adley Rutschman could close the gap potentially, but I think he's going to give me a clear advantage at this position. And since I'm not going to have advantage at other positions, that's fine. I'll go ahead and accept it. Realmuto at the end of round 4. And then my second pick, like Chris, a bit of a FOMO pick here.
Love it.
Corbin Carroll, who I was just writing him up in Breakouts 2.0, like an assistant principal writing him up. And
he knows what he did.
He does. What he did was draw 9 walks compared to 6 strikeouts so far this spring, like just reminding me of the incredible plate discipline he has. And I think everybody's counting on him for 30 plus steals. This format, he might actually be a safer bet to contribute big numbers because the most questionable part of Corbin Carroll's skill set is the power, the home run power. However he falls short in home runs, he's going to make up for it with doubles and triples. Those don't have direct value in a 5x5 league, but they, of course, do in a points league. So I think a little bit of a reach here at 49th overall, but glad to fill a weak position, which is something I haven't been able to do a lot of early in this draft. And I think Carroll's going to live up to it when all's said and done.
Yeah, I love the pick too, Scott. Once I scroll down a little bit, I want to move him higher in the rankings, but it's tough. There's a lot of players that I do like a little bit more than him in a head-to-head points league. But yeah, I think that's a fine place to take him And I noticed on Tuesday that he was batting 6th in the lineup, and that was against a lefty. So maybe that's something that they're experimenting with. He'll lead off against righties, maybe drop down a little bit against left-handed pitching. But either way, Corbin Carroll is going to be an everyday player for the Arizona Diamondbacks. After Scott took him, Wander Franco goes off the board. It's a touch early, but he is really good in this format. He just barely strikes out. So it really, really helps in a points league. Jazz Chisholm at 51 overall. I actually debated him over George Springer, and that was a really tough call for me. Second base, let's be honest. I mean, the past couple of days, we've got a lot of news that it has kind of shaken up the position with Jose Altuve getting hurt and Vaughn Grissom option down to AAA. So I thought about it, but I think that's really good value for Jazz at 51st. Julio Urias, Dylan Cease, Cedric Mullins, Shane Bieber, and Chris, you are not on the clock because you were the one who took Shane Bieber. Talk to me about it.
Yeah, he's a really good option in this format. The volume's going to be there, 200 innings, 2 of the last 4 seasons. Obviously, one of those seasons he got hurt. The other one, did he lead the majors in innings in 2020? If not, he was very close. Averaged more than 6 innings, probably about 6.5 innings per start in 2020. So
I believe it was Lance Lynn who led that year.
Okay, yeah. As long as the shoulder holds up, and it did last season, I do think Shane Bieber, he's someone we talked about, I think on yesterday's podcast, is someone we haven't talked much about. I think there's some risk there, but at this point, I think he's a great pick.
All right. Well, one pick after you take Kevin Gausman, you took Shane Bieber. I took Kevin Gausman. A little bit of foreshadowing there. He is my SP2 to go along with Max Scherzer and then Christian Javier.
I'm a little annoyed by that, Frank.
Why?
Because I had just put Kevin Gausman in my queue as my next pick. Clearly, he wasn't making it to me since you had 2 picks there. Yeah, good pick.
I was debating him and Luis Castillo. I kind of like them in that 15 to 20 starting pitcher range. Though Christian Javier, I mean, he goes with the very next pick, and it's hard to argue it. He's gained a lot of steam throughout spring training, and just I think people realizing how good he was last year, and the fact that he probably shouldn't go 2 rounds later than someone like Spencer Strider. I don't know that their skill sets are that different. Strider's better, but 2 rounds better, I'm not so sure.
And he does have the RP eligibility, which helps Strider as well.
Yes.
That is the reason he went 2 rounds ahead of Javier, I would say.
But I think we see that in a lot of drafts, Scott.
Well, I mean, I guess ADP does show a distinction there.
Yeah.
But Javier has been on the rise.
After Christian Javier, Brian Reynolds goes at pick 58, Luis Castillo to pick 59. We're at the turn here, round 5 and round 6. And the reason I took Gausman there, Chris, is there was no hitter that I loved necessarily. There's some hitters that I like and see who makes it back to me here. But I was like, all right, look, it's still a points league. Could get Gausman as my SP2 to go with Scherzer. I like my first 3 hitters a lot for this format. Trey Turner, Vlad, and George Springer. So just kind of wait and gobble up some pitching and see who falls. And that was one of the hitters that I was thinking about taking. It's Eloy Jimenez, last pick of round 5, who we got some news on Tuesday. I know he left the game on Monday with right calf cramping, but it sounds like he'll be in the lineup Wednesday, and the White Sox are not worried about it. Maybe just DH the guy, and this won't happen if he's not.
Apparently, it actually was an issue in the dugout. And then he got pulled once he went back out. He tried to, I guess, play through it was what I saw. So that's a nothing injury, I think. Obviously whenever Eloy Jimenez and left a game we're going to be concerned about that, but it seems like there's nothing there.
All right. Well, maybe I should have taken him then because some of these pitchers available are still pretty good. Probably would have been fine with one of these guys.
No,
maybe I'm lying.
Yeah, a drop-off's approaching, I think, at starting pitcher.
Scott, you haven't taken a pitcher yet, have you?
I have not.
Oh, all right. So
by design, I mean, obviously I could have taken a really good one in place of Corbin Carroll. And that's, I was saying 49th, a bit of a reach. What justifies that reach for me is that I am willing to go the thrifty route at starting pitcher. And that's why I can't move Corbin Carroll up much higher in my rankings, is because I don't want to make them so exaggerated that nobody else is going to follow them,
Well, you've got Shohei Ohtani, Scott, so you could just play him at start.
Well, you know, I was thinking, so Vinny Pasquantino here goes with the first pick of round 6.
Wait.
I was thinking
Who, Scott?
Vinny P, baby. First pick of round 6, and I was thinking if he lasted to the end of round 6, that might have been something I consider. You know, I already have Goldschmidt, I have Ohtani occupying the utility spot, but I might have considered taking Vinny Pasquantino and just shifting Ohtani to SP, and I don't know, maybe working out a trade down the line if Pasquantino proves he deserves to be a starting caliber first baseman in this format. But this would be his better format as a guy who he walked more than he struck out as a rookie, right? He actually had more walks than strikeouts, which just to go along, of course, with the power production we expect him to have.
All right. Well, another one of those starting pitchers went. It was Yu Darvish with the second pick of round 6. So, all right, I'm actually, I think it worked out that I took Kevin Gausman there because there's one other pitcher here. And will I say his name? Yeah, sure. Why not? It's Zach Gallen. I think he's kind of the end of a tier, but I wrote him up in Bus 1.0. I don't think he's going to bottom out. I just think maybe he's a little bit like a touch overvalued. He was so good in the second half, but he had a 230 BABIP last year. I just can't see that sustaining as great as he was. And I think he's a solid pitcher, but I just don't know that he's going to come close to replicating something like that.
Zach Gallen has been someone throughout his career that has had really low BABIPs. I think he's at like 270-ish for his career. So that's something that he does appear to have some skills basis in. Although I do think, you know, there was a clear better pitcher available who just went off the board, Yu Darvish, who actually also outscored Corbin Burns last season, which is pretty impressive. I think I might have that right.
He threw a ton of quality starts last year. So in any league with quality starts as a bonus or a category, I think Yu Darvish could see a little bit of a boost there. Byron Buxton goes, sorry, Chris. Randy Arozarena. So I was thinking about Randy. I mean, a Roto League is a much better format for him. Same thing with Adolis Garcia. So I don't really want to do that. I'm going to go the same route as Scott. And I just think this is really good value for a catcher that I don't typically wind up with. There's just not really anybody that I love taking here. So it's going to be Will Smith for me. And at 65 in a head-to-head points league, he's got good plate discipline. He walks. He doesn't strike out very much. I'm fine with that pick. And Chris, you are on the clock. Let's take a look at your team and see what you got going on over here.
Yeah, I don't necessarily love the options available right now. I think there's definitely been a drop off at this point in the draft. I'm unclear as to where I want to go right now. I'm going to think it through. Please, somebody else start talking.
I'm going to run through your team so far, and you've got Matt Olson at first base, Marcus Semien at second, Peace at short, Ronald Acuna in the outfield, and Shane Bieber as your SP1. I actually think that this group, and you should be very proud of yourselves, they're doing a good job. They're sucking all the value out of the players that we like, and that's why we're kind of in this position where, okay, there's not really any player that we love at this spot, and that's why I think maybe we're going to wind up with some kind of different teams that we don't normally wind up drafting here. And with that being said, Chris, you took Emmanuel Clase. Normally closers go a little bit later in a points league format, but even with that, he is the best closer available, and you just got him in round 6.
Yeah, he's, I think, the clear second best RP in this format. And honestly, he might be better than Spencer Strider just because Spencer Strider, you know, it might be tough for him to give us 170 or 180 innings. Class A, obviously, I don't think he's going to get 42 saves again, but he was 486 points in this format. You know, even if you take 5 saves off of that, I think he's going to be a very big contributor. And we're at the point now where, like, I think there are tiers, right? Like your first round players are like 600 point players. Then you got a bunch of 500 point players. We're kind of running out of 500 point players at both the hitting and pitching side. So I think, Class A could get close enough to that, I'm okay with getting him there.
After Emmanuel Clase goes off the board, Brandon Lau at 67th overall. There's no doubt that is early for Brandon Lau, but
it's got the upside for it.
Chris, I'll come back to you because, Scott, I know you're about to make your picks. I think this could be part of the injury and the news shakeout for second base is that maybe some other players will get pulled off the board, and that's why we see Brandon Lau in the 6th round.
Yeah, I mean, you could. I think we're still a little far away from the point where you'd want to take Jose Altuve. It's well ahead of where I'd want to take Andres Jimenez. Max Muncy, I guess you could make a case for him in a points league, but yeah, I think if you're looking for a difference maker at second base, I think Brandon Lau has more upside than Tommy Edman and Andres Jimenez and probably even Max Muncy. So I think it's defensible. I've certainly argued Brandon Lau is underrated or undervalued for most of the preseason.
Interestingly, it's the same guy who took Dustin May in round 3. So we have a bit of a wild card
getting his
on our
guys.
hands.
Go out and get your guys. After Brandon Lau went Jose Abreu, Starling Marte, Xander Bogaerts. Love the value on all those players. Kind of thought about Jose Abreu, but we know first base is – wait, I already got a first baseman. What am I talking about? I got Vladimir Guerrero. And Chris, you mentioned might be a touch early for Jose Altuve. Well, not for Team Gensler. 71st overall. Scott, You're on the clock, and I hope you weren't planning to take Jose Altuve.
No, I was. It was somebody I had in mind for maybe my next pair of picks.
Okay.
Which would be closer to where I moved him in my rankings. But it's a shallow league, so I think it's a justifiable play to get a singularity at second base like that. I kind of wished somebody had taken one of these two pitchers because now I feel obligated to take both. It's just I'd be looking a gift horse in the mouth if I didn't take these two as someone who hasn't taken a starting pitcher yet here in round 6. Zach Gallen and Robbie Ray, among pitchers who are healthy, they're pretty clearly the last two who you can squint and see an ace pretty easily, I feel like. And so the fact that there was exactly 2 left for these pair of picks on a team where I've completely neglected starting pitching up to this point, I think it's just a must for me. So I'm going Zach Gallen and Robbie Ray. Robbie Ray this spring's been striking out everybody in sight.
Yeah, I know.
To get more of them.
I read an article that he's been working on a new pitch. I think it's a splitter.
Yeah. The whole Mariners staff is working on a splitter. It's crazy.
And his velocity apparently has been up. I was watching highlights. I believe he made a start on either Sunday or Monday, and he looked ridiculous. I mean, the tight pants were on. He was like screaming on every single pitch that he threw. I mean, half the time you don't know if Robbie Ray is playing in a tennis match or pitching baseballs because the guy is like grunting and yelling and just classic Robbie Ray stuff there. Interesting. So the team that takes Jose Altuve also takes Bryce Harper. Worth mentioning that we have 3 IL spots in this league. Well, 2 of them are already occupied. Looking to play, I guess, for June and July and beyond. I don't know that I would take both of them, Chris. Maybe one of them, but
it is worth pointing out.
It's a lot of draft capital on 2 injured guys.
It is. It's worth pointing out. I think Scott and I are about to make the same. We're about to make the same point, but the Phillies opted not to put Bryce Harper on the 60-day DL yet. They still could, but they are not going. They're not planning on doing so. And I was looking back at some of the reports back when he had the surgery. The report was he's planning on swinging a bat in late May was the initial report. That was back in November, I think, when he had the surgery. Well, he started swinging a bat in late February, and he's going to be facing live pitching within the next week or so. And so Bryce Harper, I think you're looking at like June is still likelier than May, but May's on the table.
May's on the table, and like I was worried for most of the draft prep season to be maybe like August. They were saying second half, right? And this, last week there was actually a report from John Heyman, and he didn't really cite anybody specific in the Phillies organization. He just said some are hoping he could be back by May. So I was, I kind of brushed it off, whatever. But now there's this news of them delaying putting him on the 60-day DL. Dave Dombrowski saying we just want to keep our options open.
Yeah, they don't need a 40-man roster spot right now. So that's
I'm not gonna take Harper this high, 74th overall. But I'm certainly much more open to taking him around pick 100 now in light of this news, especially in a shallower league like this where you can pick up replacements off the waiver wire potentially. You only have 9 hitter spots to fit. Like, this is the sort of league to take those chances. So the same guy taking Jose Altuve and Bryce Harper back-to-back here in rounds 6 and 7. Well, it's maybe 2 rounds earlier than I would do it. I do think it's more or less the right idea. I get what he's thinking.
All right, mini relief pitcher run here. We've got Josh Hader and Ryan Presley off the board in the middle of round 7, followed by Chris Bryant, Salvador Perez, and Chris, you are back up.
And I'm going to take another guy I have not taken yet this spring, and I'm going to take the last third baseman left, and that's Gunnar Henderson, who doesn't have as much hype as Corbin Carroll. I think the minor league numbers aren't quite as impressive, but as we continue to see Corbin Carroll pushed up and up and up, and this is not the first time I've seen Corbin Carroll go around 50 or even earlier than that. Gunnar Henderson doesn't have quite the same helium. His spring numbers aren't as
he's had
impressive.
A pretty bad showing this spring. I don't think the Orioles are considering sending Gunnar Henderson down or anything. Brandon Hyde, the manager, said he just feels like Henderson's having a typical rookie spring.
Yeah,
but while Corbin Carroll's putting up numbers, Henderson isn't.
I will point out, he's got a 723 OPS. When you said that, I was like, oh man, Gunnar Henderson must be in the 500s. But 723, that's not. He's walking a bunch. He's got some extra base hits.
It's largely walks. Yeah.
Yeah. He's only got 5 hits on 27 at bats, but he's striking out about 25% of the time. So it doesn't necessarily suggest. No. I'm not.
It's
I'm
not
saying
especially meaningful. It's not especially meaningful. I'll grant that, but that explains, I think, the disparate helium between Carroll.
I was a little surprised. I did expect worse once you said that. So I think it's okay.
Gosh, Chris, you just crushed me with that Gunnar Henderson pick, man. Because I was scrolling around. I'm like, what positions do I need? I need second and third base. So my plan was to go Gunnar Henderson and then Max Muncy. You ruined that plan. So.
Yeah, sorry. That's why you don't make plans.
Yeah.
Then you did follow up with Muncy.
Yeah,
right?
It's a bit of a reach. I mean, 80th overall. I think I have him just outside the top 100. He is much better in a points league.
His ADP in CBS leagues is 74, which are primarily points leagues.
I don't have a second baseman or a third baseman, so Max Muncy will fill one of those roles for me, and I'm all right taking him there. We'll see what happens with the next couple of picks here. I still only have one outfielder, but Gunnar Henderson and Max Muncy, those were the two that I had in mind. When I made the Will Smith pick, Will Smith, the catcher.
I know what you're going to say.
I didn't really want to do it because I knew that some good catchers would fall. And Adley Rutschman being.
I wonder which one you mean.
I was just.
Yeah. I mean, now that we're talking about him, somebody's going to snatch him up right away, I'm sure. But it is a little bit crazy that he is there have been 5 catchers taken and none of them is Adley Rutschman. He's my number 2 catcher in this format. His plate discipline's so good.
I almost took him over Will Smith, Scott.
I haven't ranked over Will Smith. He hit a zillion doubles last year. So even if he doesn't take that next step forward with the home run power, he should be great in this format with double doubles. But he has 4 home runs this spring. Just hit a big one off Chris Sale today on Wednesday.
In fairness, I hit a home run off Chris Sale today.
He did give up a couple shots today, though. Both he and Alex Cora were did not seem the least bit concerned after the game, for what it's worth.
All right, well, let's catch people up on some picks. And after I took Muncy, Carlos Rodon, another name that I was thinking about. I think that this is a good range to get him. Some good news coming out. He threw I believe it was a bullpen the other day, and sounds like he's doing fine in terms of just recovering from that bullpen so far. So maybe it's a couple of starts and we get Carlos Rodon back in by the end of April. I think this is a good spot to get him. Dalton Varsho, Logan Webb, Teoscar Hernandez, and boom, goes.
There you go. Yeah.
Adley Rutschman goes off the board. Let's take our second break here, and when we return, we'll catch you up on the latest picks.
Golf's biggest stars descend on Oak Hill for one unforgettable major, the PGA Championship, coming in May to CBS.
Welcome back into Fantasy Baseball today. Thank you to those watching us live on YouTube. Make sure to like, leave a comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. Stephen Kwan, the second pick of round 8. And we know Kwan barely strikes out. And he was really good in the second half last year in terms of getting on base. And I think he's fine in either format. offer some batting average and 20-ish steals in Roto, but it's probably even a little bit better in head-to-head points leagues. So I think that's not overly surprising.
I kind of like the team that Church of Scott White is putting together. It's a bit of a misnomer because he's got 4 starting pitchers through 8 picks.
Maybe he's 2021 Scott White. I don't know.
Yeah. But like I loved the value on Logan Webb there. I was going to take him if not. He was sneaky really good in this format last year. He's got Freddie Freeman, Austin Riley, Luis Robert, and Stephen Kwan. So very good start to the offense, but obviously a lot of picks left. But Zach Wheeler, Yu Darvish, Luis Castillo, Logan Webb. That's a very good pitching staff for this scoring format, especially.
Okay, after Stephen Kwan, Jake Cronenworth, who is sneaky good in head-to-head points leagues, and he has some versatility. He has second base and first base eligibility. And then after him, O'Neal Cruz goes at pick 88. He does fall a little bit in this format because of the strikeouts. And
I was just getting ready to cue him up, though. I was like,
got myself a little bit of a decision here.
I'm preparing to be very mad at Frank because I feel like he's going to take the.
Is that how you wanted?
Yes.
I got you back.
That was the last guy in my queue from my previous pick, and I wasn't sure if I should take Gunnar Henderson or Joe Musgrove. I don't think Gunnar Henderson would have made it back to me. Now I know Joe Musgrove wouldn't have. I'm very upset with you. That was very rude of you to do.
You want to make a trade, Chris? Because technically, if you didn't take Gunnar, I would have taken him, and then I would have taken Muncy, and Joe Musgrove might have made it back to you.
Well, I was going to take, I was either Musgrove or Henderson there. So,
all right. Well, I get Musgrove. Look, hopefully the toe is fine because I keep drafting a bunch of Joe Musgrove. I took him in a recent NFBC draft. I got him in Tout Wars. Sounds like he's only going to miss 1 turn in the rotation. Maybe it's 2. I haven't seen an update on him recently, so hopefully everything is progressing there. I don't know if we need to pause the draft or anything.
No,
Chris?
I'm fine. I was just like Musgrove was my clear best player remaining, and I said I was preparing. Yes, I said I was preparing for Scott to take the guy I wanted, but I wasn't actually prepared for it. And so
it was Frank anyway. So.
Yeah, Frank. Sorry,
I didn't do anything to you.
Yeah, in spirit you did.
Let the record show.
Not yet. You haven't done anything yet, Scott. So through 8 rounds, I've got Will Smith at catcher, Vladimir Guerrero Jr., Max Muncy at second or third base, Trey Turner at shortstop, George Springer is my lone outfielder, and at starting pitcher, I've got Max Scherzer, Kevin Gausman, and Joe Musgrove. Let's see what else is going on. Chris took Tristan McKenzie, then Reese Hoskins, who typically is a little bit better in this format. Lots of walks, really good OBP. Brandon Nimmo goes 92nd overall. He's battling ankle and knee sprains right now.
But he was the number 9 outfielder in this format last year, amazingly. I think that speaks more to the state of the outfield in 2022 than Nimmo specifically, the fact Nimmo stayed healthy. But, he gets extra base hits. He gets on base at a nice rate. It's decent.
Can we... I'm going to just throw out a conversation point about a sleeper that I want to take in the later rounds, and I may screw myself over in that. But a bit of news from today that I think actually really could matter. Carson Kelly fractured his forearm.
Oh.
I don't know if you saw that. He got hit by a pitch yesterday. He's going to miss probably a couple of months. Gabriel Moreno, we thought he was probably going to be the small side of the catcher platoon in Arizona. He's about to play a ton early on in the season. I'm just going to go ahead and this is kind of what we talk about in season more, where like any catcher who has a pulse pretty much jumps into the top 12. I'm moving Gabriel Moreno into my top 12 at catcher as a result of this news. Maybe that's an overreaction, but I'm going to overreact.
That is interesting because I saw that Carson Kelly left after getting hit by a pitch on his forearm yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it turns out he's going to miss some.
Oh!
No!
No!
Scott is tilting.
I was holding my breath ever since Gunnar Henderson and Max Muncy went back to back to take Jordan Walker here. And I thought it was going to happen. I don't even know what I'm going to do now with these picks.
Well, I will let you figure that out, Scott. Let's catch people up on the picks after Brendan Nimmo, Sean Murphy, Logan Gilbert, Jordan Walker, 95th overall at the end of the 8th round. I'm eyeballing my catcher rankings to see if I agree with you, Chris. I think I can get Gabriel Moreno up to 13, ahead of Danny Jansen, ahead of Grandal.
Yeah, Cal Raleigh is the
the
toughest one. He's 12 for me. I'm moving Moreno up above Cal Raleigh but out of principle for now, and then we'll see in the harsh light of day tomorrow whether I actually agree with that decision. But Gabriel Moreno, obviously he was a top 10 prospect last season, was traded in the Dalton Varsho deal, if you don't remember.
Yeah.
Very, very similar profile to someone like Alejandro Kirk. The problem is it's a very similar profile to Alejandro Kirk or Keibert Ruiz. And it's like, which path is he going to go down? He didn't necessarily, impress a ton last season while losing rookie eligibility, but it was only like he lost rookie eligibility, but not because of games played or plate appearances. It was time served on the roster. So he only got like 80 plate appearances last year.
And Gabriel Moreno so far this spring is 8 for 20 with 2 home runs. The biggest question mark is, can he raise the launch angle? Can he hit for power? And I think he's purposely trying to quiet some of the doubters here in spring training by lifting the ball a little bit and popping some home runs. So yeah, that is a really interesting note on Gabriel Moreno. At the turn, Scotty, you jump into the starting pitcher pool. You get one of your favorites in Chris Sale, but the next pick, that was kind of interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there was nobody. So I took George Kirby. There was nobody obvious, I thought, to take. So it was a chance to luxuriate a little bit. And I decided, well, I don't have any shares of George Kirby yet. It was a popular breakout pick. I don't share the enthusiasm for him, but it's nice to when you don't feel like you're having to reach for it, when you do have a chance to kind of go off script a little bit, it's nice to get in on the hype. And if all those very smart people who are predicting big things for George Kirby are right, then at least in this league, I'll be able to benefit from it. I considered going Devin Williams instead because, we've just attacked relief pitchers so little here that in round 9, the third ranked one, according to my own rankings, leaving out Strider, of course, is still there. But I decided that I didn't want to. I don't love investing in a relief pitcher in this format, and I'm going to stick to it.
All right. After you took George Kirby, Nick Lodolo, who threw 6 shutout innings on Monday with 8 strikeouts. He looked fantastic. He was going up against an Angels lineup that was missing both Mike Trout and Shohei Ohtani, obviously. And then after Nick Lodolo, Christian Yelich, Willie Adames, Carlos Correa, Devin Williams, and Chris, you took Hunter Green. And we talked about him recently. Was it in breakouts? You said he could be both a breakout and a bust, and I actually wound up writing him up in bust 2.0. I get the upside. I get the hype on Hunter Green. He's super fun to watch, but 48% fly ball rate in Great American Ballpark, it just scares the crap out of me, man.
Oh, yeah. No, I think I did end up, I'm trying to remember. I might have ended up taking him out of bust 2.0. He is still in breakouts 2.0. And I think that highlights just he's an incredibly high variance player. What we saw, I mean, remember when he came back from the IL last season, he looked like the best pitcher in baseball. It was 5 starts, 20-something innings, but he had I think it was 38 strikeouts in 26 innings or something absurd like that. His swing strike rate was through the roof. The fastball is not a good pitch right now. It gets a ton of whiffs. It is the hardest fastball I'm going to say ever. Maybe some old person will yell at me about Nolan Ryan. Either way, there has never been a recorded starting pitcher who throws as hard as often as Hunter Green. The problem is he gave up a lot of home runs with the pitch. It was, I think, the third highest expected slugging percentage on a 4-seam fastball of any pitcher, any starter in baseball last season. And he's given up 3 home runs so far or 2 home runs so far in spring training. So still a little bit of an issue. He's working on a changeup. There's so much upside. The slider is an amazing pitch. It's one of the best swing and miss pitches in baseball. It's this is kind of my FOMO team where I'm I don't think I've drafted Tristan McKenzie this year. I haven't really drafted Hunter Green. I haven't really drafted Gunnar Henderson or Matt Olson. So this is going to be a team that stands on its own a little bit among the teams I've drafted.
And I totally get why you're doing it, Chris. And I've done drafts like this in years past, and I find that every time I do something like it, it doesn't work out. Now, I'm not trying to say that your team isn't going to.
Oh yeah, no, it's going away from
right.
My valuations to a certain extent. So yeah, there's risk in it.
With Hunter Green, I actually just wrote him up in Bust 2.0, so I have all these things fresh in my mind. You're right that over his final 6 starts, he was fantastic. A 1.02 ERA. The teams that he faced: Marlins twice, Cardinals, Brewers, Pirates, Cubs. So some really good matchups. I mean, it was still a 1.02 ERA, so I get it, but
a little 2020 Zach Plesac mirror there.
I just kind of thought about this while you were talking about Hunter Green. He's kind of the pitcher version of O'Neal Cruz, no? Like he's a huge wild card. He has massive upside, but he also has really big downside too. So
yep, 100%. I mean, remember there were a lot of points last season where we're like, oh, this is it. Hunter Green's figuring it out, and like he was probably written up in the waiver wire column like 6 or 7 times last season because it was just like he would have a really good start and then he would come back and give up 4 home runs. That's just like the kind of skill set he has right now.
After Chris took Hunter Green, I come on this podcast a lot and I tell you that the disrespect for Adolis Garcia has gone too far. Well, guess what? I had to end that disrespect once again because I just took him at pick 104. I debated taking him back in round 6 when I took Will Smith, and he was here 3 rounds later. This is not his preferred format. He does not walk very much. He strikes out quite a bit. But last year, he still averaged around 3 fantasy points per game. I'll take that in round 9.
Yeah, last year, even in this format, not being his best format, he was the number 7 outfielder. Now, again, I think that is partly just the state of the outfield and the number of players who missed time there. And it was just an especially bad year for outfield. And I've talked about how I think Adolis Garcia is going to take a step back this year. But just from a pure value perspective, if I had gone hitter with that George Kirby pick instead of pitcher, I probably would have gone with Adolis Garcia as my 3rd outfielder. In fact, I think the main reason I didn't is because it's only a 3 outfielder league and I have those 2 outfield spots filled already. And I just wanted to leave one there for some of my late round targets that I like.
After I took Adolis Garcia, we see the old relief pitcher run. Jordan Romano, Ryan Helsley, Andres Jimenez, and Raisel Iglesias to finish out round 9. And then Lance Lynn, my heart breaks for the first pick of round 10. And then Tim Anderson and Chris Bassett. I've got one more pick coming up here. Blake Snell, another pitcher that I like. But I've already got 3 starters. I've got Scherzer, I've got Gausman, I've got Joe Musgrove. So I don't really feel the need to take another pitcher here. And no, I'm just going to go ahead and build the best roto lineup ever in a head-to-head points league and see how it turns out. Because this is another player where I just feel like he's lasted too long in this format. And it's Tommy Edman, who I will now slide over to second base, and I've got Max Muncy at 3rd. So yeah, again, it's not his better format, but I'm just going to keep gobbling up the value. And Chris, I love your next pick because you had to do it for the brand. Giancarlo Stanton in the middle of round 10.
Yeah, also actually someone I haven't really drafted this year at all. I don't think I've drafted Giancarlo Stanton once so far. So
fraud.
Going to end that. And, I've said it before on the podcast. I feel like given the fact that he still hits the ball just about as hard as anyone, we can no longer say Giancarlo Stanton hits the ball harder than anyone because O'Neal Cruz exists. But because he still is a 1 of 3 in terms of how hard he hits the ball, I still think there's a chance we get like one last 45 to 50 home run season from Giancarlo Stanton. He still has the skill set for it. So yeah, let's stick with the FOMO theme here.
All right. Well, after Chris took Giancarlo Stanton, there was a very interesting pick. What we'll do is we'll wrap up part 1 here of the podcast and we'll pick things up part 2 of the podcast. So we will see you over there. Make sure to tune in. Welcome back into Fantasy Baseball today. This is part 2. This is hour 2 of our live listener league draft. This is one that we're actually playing out. This is not a mock draft. This is a head-to-head points league. It's a 12-team league. And we left off in the middle of round 10. And the player who went was Masataka Yoshida, who hit
Who took him?
I didn't take him. Who took him?
Yeah, that's our wild card. What's that guy's name? Same guy who took Dustin May in round 3 and Brandon Lau in round 6. Tom Koppe? Is that how you say that? Koppe?
Yeah, we might be butchering that, but
he's
regardless.
He's doing his own thing. Which, if he wins, he'll have nobody to credit but himself.
100%. Masataka Yoshida, massive 3-run home run in the semifinal of the WBC going up against Team Mexico. And what we keep hearing, Chris, I don't know how likely this is to happen. Obviously, this is like a huge comparison, but they keep calling him the Juan Soto of Japan. So those are big shoes to fill. The Red Sox paid a big amount of money to get Masataka Yoshida on their team, but he doesn't strike out. He's got good plate discipline. It sounds like he's going to hit cleanup for the Red Sox this year. So potentially some counting stats. What do you think about this move? Because I think in a head-to-head points league, he's probably going to be really, really good.
Yeah, I think he's got, potential to be like a better version of Alex Verdugo in terms of what Boston's done. You hope for a little more power. You hope for, really good plate discipline. And I think he's got that kind of potential. So, it's sort of an unknown, right? Like we have a decent number of Japanese players who have made the jump over, and we know how to translate that kind of production, but it's still sort of a wild card. We don't know how he's going to, the style of pitching in Japan is very different. You have a lot fewer big breaking balls. You have a lot more splitters. So, it remains to be seen how he's going to translate, but the Red Sox gave him a lot of money. He's going to hit either leadoff or cleanup. It sounds like cleanup is more likely right now. And, it could be a situation where even if he's not a 30 homer guy, he hits 18, but drives in 100 runs and scores a decent amount and ends up being a really good value.
After Masataka Yoshida, Ketel Marte, very good in a points league. Nestor Cortez, Wilson Contreras, Jesus Luzardo, and Scott, you've got back-to-back picks. One of them was Dansby Swanson. Where are we going with this second pick?
And I'm relieved to get Swanson because I was sweating shortstop ever since you took Edman. He was the last left before the big drop off there, at least in this format. So that's a small consolation, I guess, for me missing out at third base. I was thinking again about closer here just because that seems to be where all the value is right now, but I don't want to. I think I'm going to be fine taking whatever's left there in points league with only 2 relief pitcher spots to fill. So I'm going to go ahead and fill that third outfield spot with a player who's looked really good this year, this spring. Player who's looked really good this spring, Taylor Ward, expected to bat leadoff for the Angels in front of Trout and Ohtani, and has shown the capacity to draw a lot of walks, which, of course, is valuable in this format. So I'm hoping
it's a good pick here. I'm not a huge fan here of his, but I did. Now I'm trying to remember. Did I remove him from Bus 2.0 as well? I might have.
You said you did, yeah.
And
that's the only reason I took him, Chris.
Yeah, you're welcome. I don't love Taylor Ward. I'm a little Kyle Schwarber. Sorry, Kyle Schwarber just hit a bomb off Yu Darvish, and I don't know if you guys were watching this plate appearance. Yeah. He hit like 6 straight foul balls, like 440 feet. Right. And it was just like he is on top of this, and he just needs to get the timing right. That was electric. That
was awesome.
Taylor Ward, yes. But 120th overall or whatever you got in 121, I love that value. Yeah.
I think if there is a format where Taylor Ward is going to be more than just kind of a mid-tier outfielder, I think this is the format.
Mm-hmm.
And I was looking at the main event ADP over at the NFBC. Again, those are very expensive drafts, $1,750 entry fee, and they're roto leagues, but just kind of trying to see like which players are getting pulled up the draft board there. Taylor Ward is going inside the top 100 now. So these are smart people putting their money where their mouth is. And Taylor Ward's getting pulled up the board. So I think it's a good pick there for you, Scotty, at 121.
Thank you.
Yeah, I
Very
thought
nice
about
of
it.
you to say.
Yes, I do like Taylor Ward. I
I
wrote him
like.
up in Sleepers 1.0. Go ahead.
Okay, so continue through the picks because there's another one I want to talk about here.
All right, so after Taylor Ward, Andrew Vaughn, Clayton Kershaw, Anthony Santander, who had a pretty big WBC himself, Jose Miranda, Freddie Peralta, and Chris takes Kyle Wright. Which one did you want to talk about?
Yeah, so Clayton Kershaw, who went 2 picks after mine, that was who I was considering if I didn't take Felix Bautista or Taylor Ward.
Good
and
value.
I think this is a point we've not really discussed much about Kershaw is I think, though it's hard to reflect in the rankings, I do think there's a pretty big difference between how you should approach Kershaw in a head-to-head league, particularly a shallower one like this versus a roto league. Because, of course, head-to-head leagues, it's weekly competitions. It's just little bites of production that you're taking. And when Kershaw's healthy for the 120, 130 innings, he's going to be healthy. He's still going to perform like an ace. He's still going to be as impactful as an ace in those weeks that he's healthy and secure your team all the wins that goes with that. It's just you're going to have to plan to fill in for him for those other weeks where he's not healthy. But you're going to be able to anticipate it, and it's not like a 130 inning pitcher who is spreading that over 30 starts. Those starts become less impactful because he's not going deep enough into them. Kershaw is going to give you all the length you want in those starts, and in a shallow league where you can fill in for him easier when he's out, I think he's more valuable than his ranking would suggest, and I think it was a good pick.
Yeah, he averaged just under 20 fantasy points per start last season. It was not nearly as high the year before, but even then it was like 15. So yeah, like you said, that's ace level production on a per start basis. It's just like, I still think it's possible he makes 30 starts, but it's certainly not the likeliest outcome. There have been enough nagging issues over the years that you just assume he's not going to get there. But yeah, like you said, it's obviously the impact he makes on your team will depend on the timing. If he makes 22 starts to start the season and then gets hurt, that's gonna hurt a little more because he's not going to be there for the playoffs. But like, if he makes 10 starts, goes on the IL for a month, and then makes the rest of the starts, you're going to feel pretty good about it.
After Chris took Kyle Wright, I had a dilemma to face because the person drafting just after me, team name is Lenar's New Bars. He's got 2 picks coming up. Go get your guys. I pulled them up the draft board a little bit, but I don't have much Newt Bar. I think I have him on one other team so far, and I think he'll be really good in head-to-head points. He's got a great eye at the plate. I think the OBP will be good. Wouldn't surprise me if he leads off against right-handed pitching. So I went out and took Lars Nootbaar at 128, and yeah, I used an unorthodox strategy of looking at team names to determine my.
Yeah, and that's almost why I passed up Taylor Ward, is because I'm like, well, I have a chance at Lars Nootbaar later. Turns out I didn't. And that's been pretty typical for our drafts. He goes much, much higher than his ADP, like 70 picks higher than his ADP. And it may be justified. I think the biggest obstacle, even more than performance, is just how much the Cardinals play him, particularly if Jordan Walker makes the team. Interestingly, Nootbaar was better against lefties than righties last year as a left-handed hitter, but it wasn't reflected in the playing time. And could that continue as they're trying to fit all these outfielders into 3 spots? Maybe that would be the card that topples the card tower, is if the Cardinals just don't play Nootbaar every day.
Yeah, that is the downside for Nootbaar, and I totally get that. But I've said this in the past. I think the cream rises to the top, and I think Nootbaar is one of their most talented outfield/DH eligible players on that team. But the decision that I was faced with was, do I take Nootbaar or Luis Severino? Because I felt like Severino lasted a little bit too far in this draft, and he went at the turn. So we'll see if I wind up regretting that pick, but maybe I should have taken Severino first and seen if Lars Nootbaar would make it back to me. After I took Nootbaar, Alejandro Kirk, Nick Castellanos, Severino, Hunter Renfroe to finish out round 11. Starting up round 12, some fun picks here and some ones that Scott is probably going to hate. Miguel Vargas, Riley Green, and Charlie Morton.
Yeah, Miguel Vargas at 133. I mean, if he's everything I think he is, it's justified. But it's just frustrating that I keep adjusting my expectations in these drafts. Okay, even though he's going 220, I have to take him 180. I have to take him 150. I was planning to take him actually with my next pair of picks to be my second baseman by week 2. But now I can't. He went 133rd. Charlie Morton's the other one you'd expect me to tilt about. I don't think I've drafted Charlie Morton yet, interestingly enough. I'm probably his biggest fan of any fantasy analyst, but I guess I've done too good a job talking him up because I never get a chance to pick him.
Yeah, so I wound up taking Jeffrey Springs with this next pick of mine in round 12. This was purely a get your guys turn for me between Lars Nootbaar and Jeffrey Springs. Springs is my SP4 on this team. Probably better in a Roto categories league, like everyone else on my team, because I don't know that he'll go that deep into his starts, but I think he'll be efficient once again. And maybe he doesn't push 7, but I could see him getting more quality starts this year and at least going 6 innings for the Tampa Bay Rays. Springs has looked fantastic so far in the spring. No pun intended. After I took Springs, Tyler O'Neill goes off the board. Ty France, Tyler Glasnow, very sneaky pick at 140. Going to miss the first month or so with that oblique injury, but we do have a few IL spots. Miles Michaelis, one of you guys speak up. What are we going with today?
Golden Girls.
All right. Well, Chris got to it first, so we're going with the Golden Girls. Chris, talk to me about Tyler O'Neill because I feel like you called him a bust, but maybe this is just too late and you gobble up the value.
Yeah, he's a bust where he usually goes, which is, let me see, I feel like it's usually around 100. Yeah, 102.4, but I got him at 138. Yeah. So that's another one where
it's a lot like Adolis Garcia.
Yeah, where it's just like, yeah, this isn't his best format. Even if things go well, he only had 432 points in 2021. He wasn't playing every single day, so that's part of it. But yeah, it's just, as a third outfielder waiting that long, I feel okay about getting him. I don't love it. I will probably take another outfielder or actually another shortstop because I do have Fernando Tatis who will have outfield eligibility. So I'm going to need some insurance there between him and Stanton, but it was just too good value to pass up.
After Miles Michaelis, Camilo Doval, and Jack Flaherty, Scott, you are up for 2 picks. I will let you think about them while I pull up your team and see who you've got on this team so far. So at catcher, you've got JT Realmuto, Paul Goldschmidt at first base, then Dansby Swanson at short, Aaron Judge, Taylor Ward, Corbin Carroll in the outfield, Shohei Ohtani at utility, the pitching staff, Chris Sale, Robbie Ray, Zach Gallen, George Kirby. This is a fun team, Scott. I mean, the only problem is you don't have a second or third baseman, but I'm sure you got something up your sleeve.
Yeah, I may be about to change one of those. I am debating that right now. I'm not going to. I'm going to go ahead and take Felix Bautista since I was thinking about taking him last time.
The Mountain.
Yeah, he's looked good since, he was delayed his start of spring training, but he's, I think, had 2 perfect innings, 2 strikeouts in each since returning, and I think he is going to break through as a stud closer this year. I basically rank him as such. Several have gone who I rank after him, including Camilo Doval. And I'm going to go the more orthodox route with the second pick here and take Joe Ryan, who I think should be great in this format, maybe in every format. I expect him to work deep into games and might take a step forward this year. He's done some work on his secondary pitches. His slider has more of a sweeping motion now, and there's some optimism in Twins camp. It's going to be more effective. I mean, his fastball's so effective. He hasn't really needed a great secondary pitch, but he's done some work on his secondary arsenal.
All right, so Joe Ryan to kick off round 13, followed by Tyler Stevenson and Lucas Giolito, who had another solid start here on Tuesday. Apparently his velocity has been down pretty much all of spring. It's down like 1 to 2 miles per hour on the fastball. But reading some stuff from White Sox beat writers, Giolito says he's not really worried about velocity. He's worried about his mechanics and executing his pitches. And they're talking up a 4-pitch mix. I mean, he's typically been fastball, changeup, slider. So, I mean, if he has 4 pitches and he can command all of them and execute, maybe velocity doesn't matter as much. But, man, between Joe Ryan and Giolito, those are probably 2 of the harder starting pitchers for me to evaluate. And as a result, I just usually wind up passing on them. It could turn out to be a mistake.
Do you feel like Ryan could get much worse than last year. I mean, the way I phrase that makes it sound like he was bad last year. I just don't know that the floor is much lower than what he showed last year, which was obviously a pretty good year.
Yeah, the only thing with Joe Ryan is he just has these blow up starts where he gets like completely destroyed. And I worry about like fly ball pitchers should be okay in the post JBE, but he gives up a lot of them. Like we're talking over 50%.
Yeah.
And he's someone that he kind of relies on deception and this like invisible fastball. I just wonder if the more times he goes around the league, do
That's
people
the
start to
thought
pick
I
him
have.
up?
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. I just kind of worry about Joe Ryan. I
Okay.
typically don't wind up drafting him.
He is that kind of profile. We haven't seen this since I mean, the juice ball era kind of messed everything up in terms of pitching evaluations. But there used to be this kind of profile we talked about where there was a big disparity between ERA and WHIP. And Joe Ryan seems like he might be that guy with pristine control. And, you know, all those fly balls are going to mean fewer hits. So the WHIP's being kept down in a couple ways. But all those fly balls could lead to home runs, which will inflate the ERA. Not as worrisome in this format as in Roto. Though in Roto, he's interesting just as kind of a whip specialist. But I don't worry, obviously, about the ERA so much in this format. As long as he's giving me quality starts with regularity, he's going to be somebody I'm happy I drafted.
You know,
I did see Chris's pick coming here.
It's a good pick.
If he had something to say about Joe Ryan, but he took Pablo Lopez, the other Twins pitcher I was considering, just a few picks later.
Just looking through Joe Ryan's game logs, you know, one thing that I wanted to see was how did he do the second time he faced a team, and actually really, really well. You know, he had 2 bad starts, once against Seattle the second time he faced them, once against Boston the second time he faced them. Other than that, I mean, you look at the game logs and he had second, third times he faced Detroit, which, you know, that's Detroit, but he had 17 strikeouts in 11 innings in those 2 starts. Second and third times he faced Cleveland, he only allowed 3 runs total in those 2 starts. Second, third, and fourth times he faced Kansas City, he only gave up 3 runs. You know, it's the AL Central, so he's going to have multiple starts against some pretty crappy lineups. Sorry. But that was a little salty. But
gosh.
Yeah,
I was just about to take him. That was Reed Detmers at the end of round 13. Gosh.
Yeah, he's one that just, I feel like the price hasn't moved up to reflect the real upside that seems to be there. So he was in my queue for sure. And yeah, that's
I gotta say though, Reed Detmers, I feel like could be a pitcher with a big disparity between his points
Roto and points,
Roto value, because 6-man rotation, so he's not going to have many 2-start weeks. And I think he's going to excel mostly with strikeouts above anything else, which are of the value on them is diluted in this format.
Yep, absolutely.
To a Roto league. So I'm okay passing him up. I would have been excited to take him a little later. It's you know, if he goes the full extent of his possible breakout is just a no questions asked ace, Reed Detmers is going to be valuable in every form, obviously. But if he just gets kind of halfway there, I think this will be his lesser format.
All right. After we saw Kenley Jansen was the last one we left off with. That was who I took, my first relief pitcher. He's kind of the last closer. I feel really good about the job security and that he'll actually be pretty good when he does pitch. Gleyber Torres, Anthony Rizzo, Christian Walker. I think 3 great hitter values at this point in the draft in round 13. Reed Detmers to finish off the round. And then Jose Barrios and Kodai Senga as we get into round 14. Barrios, I mean, we had that one start in the WBC where he just looked absolutely awful and he got destroyed. And I feel like he hasn't done anything since then. And we just kind of have that lasting image in our mind. And last year, Barrios was terrible. But if he gets back on track, I mean, he was someone that typically eats innings, throws quality starts, pitches for a good team in the Blue Jays. I could see it making some sense, specifically in a head-to-head points league. So I think that's a fine pick in round 14. And then Merrill Kelly. Scott, the Mount Rushmore is dwindling.
Yeah. Merrill Kelly and Miles Michaelis went a couple rounds earlier, right? So I was stressing about, you know, whether, remember my first 2 pitchers in round 6 and 7, it was Zach Gallen and it was Robbie Ray, and I kind of wish somebody had taken one so I didn't have to take both, because that's where I was thinking I'd take Gunnar Henderson or Max Muncy. Sure enough, Muncy, Henderson, and Jordan Walker go before it gets back to me. And I'm sitting here thinking, is my pitching too strong? But the upside of that is now the Mount Rushmore is going early, and I don't have to care that much because I didn't go as weak at starting pitcher as I could have gone.
All right. After we saw Merrill Kelly, Clay Holmes, I took Drew Rasmussen. He was someone we talked about on a recent podcast. We did players we haven't talked enough about. And I like Drew Rasmussen. He's kind of in a similar category as Jeffrey Springs. It's, I just hope he gets through 6 innings regularly. But I think when he pitches, he will be very good, at least on a per inning basis. Then, Chris, you took Seiya Suzuki. Again, we have 3 IL spots in this league. But frankly, I am a little surprised that you passed on the very next pitcher that went, and that was Patrick Sandoval.
Yeah, it was just Patrick Sandoval's ADP is a lot lower than this. So it's just obviously knowing that.
Get your guys, Chris.
Yeah, knowing the people who listen to this podcast are drafting with us, there's always some risk there. But I thought I could let him go another round, and obviously I couldn't. So if I could have it back, I would assume Seiya Suzuki would have been there the next time around, and I would have felt a little better about having Patrick Sandoval and Seiya Suzuki rather than just Seiya Suzuki.
After Sandoval, Hunter Brown goes off the board, and he does have relief pitcher eligibility. So much like Spencer Strider, but not nearly to the same level of productivity, Hunter Brown is a spark starting pitcher with relief pitcher eligibility. So you do like him in this head-to-head points format. Then Luis Garcia, the pitcher for the Astros, goes. And let me just kind of set the scene here. Not that people are watching along, but we're watching. It's the WBC final.
This is
fun.
You could not script this better. I'm getting actual chills about to watch this 9th inning.
We're going into the 9th inning. Japan is up by 1 run. Shohei Ohtani is going to come in to close the game, scheduled to face his teammate, Mike Trout, who is batting 3rd in the 9th inning. Again, down by 1 run for Team USA. It's going to be fun. We'll see what happens. After Luis Garcia, Mitch Haniger, who we haven't got any updates on. He's dealing with an oblique injury.
No, he started hitting again.
Okay.
I don't think he's going to be ready for opening day, but he's going to return sooner than not.
And then the pick right before Scott is Jared Kelnick. So I don't think I don't know if you were planning on taking him, Scott, but
no.
Team Gensler is taking a lot of Scott.
I'm going to do a pair of get your guys picks here, but they're not so much my guys as they're this format's guys. They're both players who've look great this spring, drawing a lot of walks, have shown the potential to draw a lot of walks in the past, and have been great in the past, and they happen to fill the 2 positions that I still have open, 2nd and 3rd base. And those 2 players are Jonathan India and Anthony Rendon.
I love it, Scott.
If they're healthy and right, this is the format where they're most likely to put up early round production. It's a big if, but they both look great this spring. They at least look healthy this spring, unlike they were really at any point last season. Anthony Rendon's line in particular is just off the charts.
Yep.
So because it's this format and because I left those 2 positions open, I think with mostly just bench spots that I'm looking to fill out otherwise, I'll go ahead and take the shot on them and hope that Jonathan India and Anthony Rendon live up to the potential they've shown in the past for this format in particular.
I still like where I got Tommy Edman, Scott, in terms of value, but if you told me I could have got Jonathan India in round 14, I probably would have went in another direction. He's somebody that I've talked about liking, and if I wait on second base, I like getting Jonathan India at this point. Frankly, regardless,
he's more your guy than mine this year.
Yeah, regardless of format too. I think he'll be good in this format. The OBP should be fine, and leading off for the Reds, I think he could be a 20-10 guy for Cincinnati. So maybe even run a little bit more. He's got a couple of steals here in the spring.
Stolen three bases this spring. Jonathan India, 3 stolen bases this spring, 8 walks versus 4 strikeouts.
Yep.
And meanwhile, let me go ahead and mention Anthony Rendon's numbers since we're doing this.
He was somebody I noticed today in the box score, Scott, and I moved up in my rankings actually because if he's healthy, you're right. And he's having a massive spring. I think he's hitting over 400. And he
must have taken an O for today. 391, 2 homers, but only 5 strikeouts and 27 plate appearances versus 4 walks. Clearly looks healthy. It is the Cactus League, and so you always have to take Cactus League stats with a grain of salt. But even prior to spring training, I was thinking Anthony Rendon is being severely overlooked at that very thin third base position, just because coming off a couple injury plagued seasons. Usually when you get that second injury plagued season in a row, we're seeing this with Chris Sale too. People are pretty quick to write off the player. It might be premature in Rendon's case, as I believe it is in Sale's case.
All right. Well, after Scott took Anthony Rendon, we see Jesse Winker. I think it's a fine pick. I've got him as a sleeper as well. Jake McCarthy goes off the board. Nathan Eovaldi, Tristan Casas, and Grayson Rodriguez. What happened, Chris?
I wanted Grayson Rodriguez. My pitcher queue got destroyed in the last.
I actually thought you were reacting to Tristan Casas.
That's kind of it. Although, in this draft, I did take Matt Olson. So my need at first base is less than what it usually is. But yeah, that's a little frustrating as well. But no, the Grayson Rodriguez pick, I wanted some fun pitching and missed out on some of my faves.
I was thinking about it too, Chris. I don't have Grayson Rodriguez anywhere yet. And it's kind of that FOMO situation, but I don't know how many innings he's going to go on a first start basis. So again, in a points league where you want volume, I like the pick, but if you just kind of want to make yourself feel a little bit better about not getting him, that's
no, for sure. That's a fair point. And I'm not sure if he's going to be the guy who just doesn't give you a lot of innings per start, or if they, try to skip some starts throughout the season to keep his innings down. But yeah, I wouldn't expect to see. I think 150 would be a really aggressive number for Grayson Rodriguez.
After Grayson Rodriguez went, we saw Chris take Ezekiel Tovar, so that's a fun pick. I took Rowdy Tellez at pick 176. I know that most people probably have filled their first base spot, or we don't have a corner infield in this league, so I had a utility spot open. I love Rowdy Tellez, so why not?
Yeah, there have been a lot of great first base values in this. I mean, Tristan Casas in addition to Tellez, and we saw Christian Walker go much later than he should have. So this is, I have experienced the frustration of, I used my second round pick on Shohei Ohtani. Can't argue with the value, the last pick of round 2.
Yeah.
But there were some obvious first base values there that I would have liked to capitalize on if I still had my utility spot open. And in fact, I still thought about it. Just, I'll use Ohtani as a pitcher, but obviously that's not optimal value for him.
After I took Rowdy Tellez, Jeremy Pena is another one. Typically in Roto leagues, he'll go around pick 125. So drops about 50 spots of value here. I don't think there's anything wrong with it at this point.
Somebody thinks there's something wrong with it.
Yeah, Chris, let's mute that mic for a second because, geez, it sounds like the cops are here doing the draft with us. Daniel Bard and Alexis Diaz. So a few more closers who have their team's respective jobs go off the board at pick in round 15. Here's what we'll do. We'll take one more break. This is the first break of hour 2, and we'll be back right after this.
Allow yourself to go back. What do you hear?
Buzz. Buzz. Buzz.
Kidnapping, cults, death. Your friendships are a little more complicated than most.
March Madness enters its second week, and the Ion College Basketball Podcast has you covered with in-depth previews, nightly recaps, bracket check-ins, and more as teams look to punch their tickets to the Final Four. Can't get enough college hoops madness. Download and follow Ion College Basketball wherever podcasts are found. After Alexis Diaz, Jorge Polanco goes with the final pick of round 15. That is pick 180. So for anyone who has an upcoming draft, if you're thinking about taking a discounted Jorge Polanco because of his injury status, likely to start the season on the IL. Maybe around pick 180 is the time to do it. We are into round 16. Little live WBC update for those listening on demand. You probably are not going to enjoy this part of the podcast, but Jeff McNeil has reached base.
That was an unbelievable at bat too. That take on a 98-mile-an-hour fastball just below the zone was outrageous.
Oh gosh. Well, this is not going to be great. And Mookie Betts hits into a double play, and it comes down to Shohei Ohtani versus Mike Trout with the game on the line. Team USA down by 1 run.
Frank, I'm about 5 seconds behind you. I'm going to need you to not react.
I will try my best. After Polanco, we get into round 16, and we've got Martin Perez, Oscar Colas, fun pick, JD Martinez. All right, I mean that's pretty interesting. I wouldn't have taken him over Roddy Tellez, but you're thinking about it now in a points league, I think it's probably a pretty good pick. Jordan Montgomery is the next pick off the board, and I am up. I think I need some more pitcher depth here. I was thinking about taking Jordan Montgomery. Let me see what other starting pitchers are left here. John Gray, somebody I do have written up as a sleeper this season. I could take a few Marlins to piss off Chris. A couple other pitchers. No, I'm gonna spare you, Chris. I'm gonna go ahead and take John Gray. I wrote him up in Sleepers 1.0, so way back in January. I liked what we saw last year. He had a couple of rough starts towards the end of last season that really kind of inflated the ERA, but before that, he was pitching to like a mid-3s ERA. It was really the best version of John Gray that we've seen outside of Coors Field, of course. So I do like that. And I like the fact that Jacob deGrom is now on the same pitching staff with him. So hopefully could pick up a few things from a fellow fastball slider pitcher in deGrom. And as soon as I brought those names up, Trevor Rogers and Edward Cabrera are the next 2 picks.
Yeah, I didn't think Cabrera would go off the board there, but I was also not thinking about taking either one of them this round. I was hoping I could wait a little while, but since you mentioned it, had to spur me into action. So there you go.
After Edward Cabrera, Alex Cobb, and DJ LeMahieu. LeMahieu, somebody I know that you like as well, Chris.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good pick if you need, first base, second base, or third base there. I would prefer not to have my first baseman be DJ LeMahieu, but if my second or third baseman are going to be DJ LeMahieu this late, I think that's okay.
All right.
You know what? You know who's still out there, by the way, here in round 16?
Who's that?
William Contreras.
Yep.
And interestingly, there are 2 teams still who need a catcher. So they're playing a little game of chicken here. Who's gonna go for it first?
Well, maybe they know that they could fall back on the newly founded Gabriel Moreno.
Maybe.
Who will like
maybe
a lot of the playing time for the Diamondbacks moving forward with the injury to Carson Kelly. After DJ LeMahieu goes, Cody Bellinger at pick 190. Scott, we're coming up on your 2 picks here. What are we thinking?
Mm-hmm. I don't want to say what I'm thinking.
Oh, well, yeah, because this guy is crushing you. So yeah, you probably shouldn't reveal it.
Okay, he picked. All right, so yeah, I'm going to, this is definitely a get your guys pick here, pick 192. A guy who I look at my starting lineup, which is now filled out, and 2 of the biggest vulnerabilities. One's third base, obviously, but 2 other vulnerabilities are second base and shortstop. And this guy, if he does stick around, might become eligible at both, and I think will be perfectly suited for this format. Anthony Volpe.
Oh.
Anthony Volpe. I think he could be a stud if he sticks around, and if he doesn't stick around, he should be up soon. It's just a question of how long will I be able to hold on to him. I don't know. The next pick, for my next pick, I'm not sure what I'm going to do. I'm going to take, no, I don't know that I really want to do that. Let me look at the relief pitcher situation.
Okay, well, in the meantime, I'm sure not many people care, but Team USA has lost. Shohei Ohtani struck out Mike Trout to end the game. It was a very fun tournament. I think came down to arguably the 2 best teams. So it made sense that Japan and USA were going up against it there in the end. I thought Dominican Republic would make it further than they did, but really fun tournament. Team Japan takes it down. Shohei Ohtani closing out Team USA.
Lars Nootbaar, that traitorous fiend.
Oh, gosh. I also wanted to bring up what Anthony Volpe did on Tuesday. He went 1 for 2. He was batting, it looks like, 5th in the lineup with a good amount of the starters in there. He was batting 5th. He went 1 for 2 with a walk and a run scored. Did he steal another base? He did. Picked up his 5th steal. So I think it's a fun pick, Scott. I mean, we're seeing other prospects go around this time. Oscar Colas went a little bit earlier. I think this is probably the right time.
I just wrote the 12 prospects, the top 12 prospects to stash at the start of the year. And I left Volpe out of it because I think his chances of making the roster are that good. I mean, if you're still with the major league club at this point, of course they're that good. I mean, Vaughn Grissom's already been sent down, right? So I think it's basically 50-50 between him and Oswald Peraza, who makes the Yankees roster. And, I was talking about Peraza a lot earlier. I think he has upside as well. But Volpe has more upside, and especially for this format, because there's a huge plate discipline disparity between those two players, Volpe's being much better, of course. So, yeah, this shallow, once you're getting into filling out your bench spots, I think you go crazy for upside. So I ended up pairing Tony Gonsolin with Volpe. Obviously going to begin the year on the IL, but when he gets back, should be a guy who racks up a lot of wins for a good Dodgers club. And, in the meantime, he's not going to have to take up a bench spot because I can stash him on the IL.
Tony Gonsolin, as you mentioned, Scott, starting on the IL with an ankle injury. Last year, he had the forearm. He does have a history of shoulder, but I mean, at pick 193, can't really argue against it. Taking a shot on the upside there. After Gonsolin, Tyler Mahle, Sonny Gray, Noah Syndergaard, Garrett Whitlock. Whitlock has recently returned to the Red Sox. He was battling an injury earlier on in camp, and he is relief pitcher eligible. So another,
I like that one.
Yeah, another spark going off the board. He's been really good as a reliever, Garrett Whitlock. Not as good of a starter. So we're still waiting to see, though, that talent translate as a starting pitcher. We'll see if he could do it this season. Brendan,
one thing I like about Whitlock, just moving forward, through the rest of draft season, the next 8 days or so, is he's going to get sent down at some point in the next week or so. I'm pretty sure they're saying he's going to make a couple of turns through the rotation, at least one at AAA. So he's probably going to be a forgotten guy in a lot of ways. And I think there's a lot of upside there. I think he's a super talented player and, looked good in his first spring start. I think he's got a chance to be a very useful option, especially as a spark. So I think that's a really good pick.
After Whitlock, Brendan Donovan goes, and he's got multi-position eligibilities. Second base, third base, and outfield. He's looked really good so far in the spring. Has talked about adding more loft to his swing and pulling the ball. And I think he's got like 3 home runs. So don't think he's going to be this big power hitter all of a sudden, but maybe some increased power from Brendan Donovan. We know he makes a lot of contact. So an interesting play there for the Cardinals. Chris took Tyler Anderson. So another one of the Golden Girls.
Golden Girls, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you for being a
the
friend.
Mount Rushmore or the Four Horsemen, if you prefer.
Or the Four Oarsmen. The Four
Boarsmen. Yeah, be careful how you say that.
Yes, of course. And after Chris took Tyler Anderson, I took Carlos Carrasco. Now, I'm not sure how true this is. Someone tweeted it at me, so take it with a grain of salt. I don't think we know scheduling yet or where Carrasco will be in the Mets rotation. He'll either be the 3 or the 4. But someone told me that Carrasco will open up with the Marlins twice and the Oakland A's. So if you are taking Joe Musgrove and he's going to miss the first couple of weeks of the season, I think pairing him with Carlos Carrasco is a very sneaky strategy because you get those really good matchups while you're waiting for Musgrove to come back, and you go ahead, throw Carrasco in your lineup. He's looked fine so far this spring. He obviously still pitches on a really good team with the New York Mets. So as long as he's healthy, I think Carrasco will pitch deep into his starts and likely wind up with a good amount of wins this season. After I took him, Whit Merrifield, Matthew Boyd, a very sneaky pick, has looked awesome so far in spring, and he has relief pitcher eligibility. And then Alec Bohm. I thought about taking Bohm a while ago just as another bench bat, maybe throw him in utility with like Rowdy Tellez, but
even though I scoffed at Alec Boehm when we had Ariel Cohen on as a guest, I'm putting together my breakouts 1.0. I was working on that just before this podcast. Adding Boehm to it. Adding Boehm.
Let's go.
To breakouts. I mean, partly just because of the need at third base. I have to find excuses to take other ones. But I like what I've been hearing. I mean, he's hit 4 home runs this spring. And though he hasn't made a conscious effort to improve his launch angle, he did gain, I think it was like 10 to 15 pounds of muscle this offseason. And they're saying they think the added strength is helping him to turn on pitches that he should turn on better. And so you're just like, it's more like he's going to pull enough of the pitches he could hit out now to actually hit them out, even without a big improvement in launch angle.
It's the example I've gone to a lot, but it's what Christian Yelich just talked about when he started hitting for power. Alec Boehm is not Christian Yelich, even pre-breakout, but it's the idea, like, I think I saw Christian Yelich either he said in an interview or he tweeted it, but he said, like, I'm not trying to hit more fly balls. I'm trying to hit the ball. I'm trying to meet the ball at the front of the plate rather than letting it drift back so I can get out in front of it. That's the idea. It's in practice the same thing, but it's not a Josh Donaldson or Justin Turner or JD Martinez situation where he's, building this uppercut swing. It's hitting the ball at a different part of the swing path.
And it wouldn't take a big improvement in home runs for Boehm to be a strong contributor in fantasy. Now, his walk rate was so bad last year. I don't know if it's going to hold him back in this format, even if he does have a breakthrough. I think he showed pretty good plate discipline in the minors, if I'm remembering correctly. I don't know. Somebody could check on that, but that wasn't the case in the majors last year at all. But thinking of it more from a 5x5 perspective, he was already a 290 hitter last year, just by virtue of playing as often as he did. He got between 70 and 80 runs in RBI. So if he ups his home run total by 5 or 6 with the added runs in RBI that'll go with it, I mean, you're looking at a pretty useful player at a position where there's a great need, and especially a great need at the point in the draft where Alec Boehm tends to be taken.
We do see some pretty big walk rates here, Scott, in the minor leagues.
Yeah, I thought so.
In 2018, 8.3%. 2019 at A-ball, 12.9% walk rate.
That's better.
At high A in 2019, 9.6%. And then at double A in 2019, 10.4%. So
kind of middling walk rates in the minors. It was just playing bad in the majors last year. I don't know how much improvement Alec Boehm has in that regard, but maybe some. That'll help him in this format specifically.
I like it though. I like it. I wrote up Alec Boehm in Breakouts 2.0 as well. So
what did he do, Frank?
What?
Is detention next?
What's up?
I mean, once you hear the write-up, I wrote him up.
Yeah.
Like once you make the assistant principal connection, I can't unhear it now. I'm sorry.
Right. Alec Boehm, what did he do? Well, he just hit a bunch of bombs so far in spring, and so he's earned that right. After he went Jose Urquidy at the end of round 17, and then into round 18, Jeff McNeil, Jose Leclerc, Michael Conforto, Andrew Heaney, and I am off the board. Somebody who's gotten my attention so far this spring as well, coming off a truly awful start. He was great before that. I've kind of warmed up to Kyle Bradish, and pitching in that ballpark out in Baltimore and Camden Yards. I think it's obviously better for left-handed pitching with that, basically big cutout in left field. But he's looked good so far, mostly good before he got blown up on Monday. Strikeouts have been up. He's like a popular sleeper pick around the industry. So I've been drafting more Kyle Bradish, and I think I'm going to continue doing so. And
what's that metric that Eno Saris came up with to measure pitchers? Stuff plus. Yeah. I know Eno Saris likes Bradish.
Yes, he does.
And some people, like, just by virtue of Eno Saris's Stuff Plus liking him, people are going to like him. But yeah, I mean, Bradish, he had a couple near no hitters late last season and was working deep into games consistently. The strikeout rate was lacking, but it seems like there's a potential for him to improve in that regard. And nobody that I read seemed particularly concerned about his blow up start last time out. So I think it's a fine pick.
Well, thank you, Scott. And Speaking of fine picks, I think Chris made one as well. A very sneaky pick in Jurickson Profar, going at pick 210. Recently signed with the Colorado Rockies, and there is talk that he could lead off for the Rockies. So someone who walks quite a bit, doesn't strike out, and you're leading off in Colorado. I think that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, I said I needed some insurance at outfield. I took Seiya Suzuki for my bench as well. Obviously, he's going to need a couple of weeks at least to get up to speed. But I think Jurickson Profar is very good insurance at outfield for the sort of high variance Giancarlo Stanton, Tyler O'Neill combo.
He was 19th among outfielders last year, Jurickson Profar, even not playing in Colorado. And I've talked about how the outfield was in a pretty sorry state last year for this format in particular, and that contributes to Profar being that high. But yeah, I think it's a strong pick at this point.
Thank you.
I'm going to. What am I going to do? I'm going to snatch up Lance McCullers here, sort of like the Tony Gonsolin pick last time. Yeah, we have 3 IL spots. Okay, I wasn't sure how many we had. So 2 of them are going to be filled right away by Gonsolin and Lance McCullers, but that's fine. That just gives me more opportunities to play the waiver wire, and hopefully I get some nice returns come May. Come what May? Come May. And the other player I'm going to take here, so we did just see Matt Chapman go. Eugenio Suarez is out there if I want like a stable third base option, but in a league this shallow, I'm going to aim higher than that. Ooh, with which pick? Oh, I'm having second thoughts now.
Uh-oh. Should you have taken Lance McCullers, Scotty?
No. I didn't. I don't want. What should I do? I'm going to take Josh Young.
Oh, all right. Sneaky pick.
Yeah.
Go with the upside. And I think we mentioned this on yesterday's podcast, but Josh Young has a sub 15% strikeout rate so far in the spring. Last year, he had a 38% strikeout rate in the small sample, returning in September, making his debut with the Rangers. So you don't put too much stock, I get it, in spring training, but specifically a skill that we wanted to see improvement from in Josh Young, it has paid off so far. He's looked good in that regard. After Scott took Josh Young, Eduardo Rodriguez, who's having a very good spring, Thairo Estrada, and Javier Baez. Chris, we're coming up. Go ahead.
The thing I like about picking Josh Young in this format in particular, like 252 players are rostered in this format, not counting IL spots. So it's pretty shallow. I think it's going to be pretty clear early on if Josh Young is right or not, if he's fixed, if he's going to live up to the upside in the way we expect. Because strikeout rate stabilizes pretty early, right? If he's still striking out 30, 40% of the time, I can move on pretty quickly from him and not keep that bench spot occupied. Turn my attention to the other many emerging waiver wire options. So that's part of the reason I opted to go Young there instead of maybe like an Eugenio Suarez.
All right. After Javier Baez, Matt Mervis, first base prospect with the Chicago Cubs, likely going to start in the minors. I think that's probably the latest there. They've got Eric Hosmer and Trey Mancini, so it kind of clogs things up there for him, but he was awesome in the minors last year and had a really, really strong showing out in the Arizona Fall League as well. And after that, Jock Peterson and Chris, you select Roansy Contreras. I know this isn't the first time you've selected him either.
Yeah, I'm starting to talk myself into him. I think he's got a lot of the pieces to be a good pitcher. He's been working on the changeup this spring. I'd like to see that develop, but it's my last bench pick, so I've got 2 picks left: a relief pitcher and a catcher. And I'd take a little bit of an upside opportunity on a pitcher there.
All right, so I also took a starting pitcher who has relief pitcher eligibility. It is Nick Martinez, who will be in the Padres rotation, followed by Austin Meadows and a potentially very sneaky pick here in Jared Schuster, who's battling out for the Braves' 5th starter job. And the latest, Scott, you said that you think Schuster is the leading candidate.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of just going on their last start. He struck out 7 in, I think, just a little over 4 innings against the Red Sox. I mean, Dylan Dodd was good too, but they're going to have to settle on one eventually, unless they decide to begin the year with Kyle Wright on the IL. He made his spring debut, I believe it was Monday, and the results weren't great. But they've been saying all along Wright should be ready to go for his first turn, so I don't imagine that's going to change. And I don't think Schuster or Dodd is on the 40-man roster, so they probably will just go with one, and my guess is Schuster, but it could change.
Alrighty. Well, after Schuster, I was going to save this guy for my last pick, but I guess that's not happening because Trevor Story goes, who will likely miss the first 2, maybe 3 months, probably closer to 3 months, first half of the season for Trevor Story. He is returning from an elbow injury. He had the internal brace put in, right? Is that what it was for Story, or did he have straight?
Yeah,
Yes,
kind
he
of
had
the Tommy John half measure.
Right.
Yep.
So,
which is becoming more of a thing. It's a little surprising Harper didn't try that. It might have not been, you need a specific type of tear, but yeah, it's supposedly allows you to come back a little quicker. So that's the hope here.
By the way, we're in the second to last round here. William Contreras is still there.
That's because it's a 1-catcher league. 10 teams have a catcher.
2 don't.
And yeah, me and
you're
me
one
and
of
one
them.
other guy are.
So I guess what you're saying is you feel just as good about Gabriel Moreno as William Contreras.
Not necessarily, although I think in this format it's entirely possible that Gabriel Moreno ends up being a little better just because, Contreras, big power, big strikeout numbers. So, we'll see. We'll see.
The last pick of round 19 was Kenta Maeda, who has struggled this spring. I still kind of think he's a sneaky pick, but I do want to see him kind of get better as we get closer to the season. Let's take our final break, but when we return, we'll catch you up on the latest picks. And one of them was William Contreras. We'll be right back. Welcome back into Fantasy Baseball Today. Make sure to download and follow our 5-minute podcast, Fantasy Baseball Today in 5, wherever you listen to podcasts. Starting off round 20, Eugenio Suarez, the aforementioned William Contreras. Was this one of the teams that actually needed a catcher?
Yes.
All right, because it would have been really it would have been something if it was another team that just grabbed the second catcher, wouldn't it?
That would have been pretty funny, but it didn't happen. And yeah, now unless Frank wants to take Gabriel Moreno,
nope.
I'm going to.
That's what I'm saying. The fact we talked about it, I halfway wondered if somebody would do it just to get a reaction. Take a second catcher.
Yeah, no, I'm pleased that I ended up with a Gabriel Moreno. I'm, obviously I'm not 100% convinced he's going to be a great player, but being able to wait till my second to last pick and get a guy with his kind of talent, I'm happy about that.
The first base values continue, by the way, because here with the third pick of round 20, Josh Bell.
It's a really good pick. I thought about it for a while, just taking him as a bench bat and maybe shuffling through him and Rowdy Tellez as my utility, but really good in a points format too.
I mean,
yeah. So he wasn't even that great last year at the standards we've seen Josh Bell be in the past. His point per game average was the same as Nate Lowe and Rowdy Tellez in this format because he walks so much and strikes out so little.
Did you see who's still out there though? I mean, I know we're all kind of out on CJ Cron, but yeah, CJ Cron might go undrafted in this league.
Yeah, I know.
I
don't think I want to use my last bench spot on him, but it is.
I mean, if nothing else, you play him at home.
It does speak to the depth of first base in a league this shallow.
Yes.
That Josh Bell could go in the second to last round here. Okay, so CJ Cron just went. We don't have the embarrassment of me having to explain in the mock draft results why CJ Cron didn't win. So thank you for that.
But like, still some very good players out there. Nico Horner, Ahmed Rosario, guys that get drafted.
Yeah.
Yeah, they typically do. I want to ask you guys about the pick that I made, and someone that, like Kyle Bradish, is really growing on me this spring, battling for the Mets' 5th starter job, and it's David Peterson. With Jose Quintana out the first 2 or 3 months of the season, it's Peterson versus McGill. McGill got blown up in relief the other day. David Peterson so far this spring, 12 shutout innings, 1 hit allowed, 8 walks. It's way too many. 13 strikeouts. So, man, 1 hit allowed in 12 innings pitched. What do you guys think about David Peterson as a late round sleeper?
It's fine. I did like him last June when he started throwing his slider more. He was somebody I wrote about in the waiver wire column for a couple weeks there, and I think there's some talent. It's going to take throwing enough strikes and optimizing his pitch selection.
Yeah, 47% whiff rate on his slider. It's just that's kind of all he's got. And I'm not sure he's better than Tyler McGill, but I think either of those guys is an interesting late round flyer.
After I took David Peterson, Chris winds up with his man crush, Gabriel Moreno, pick 234. It's just fantastic value. Brett Beatty, also think that's a fun pick. CJ Cron, Garrett Mitchell, Taijuan Walker. Brett Beatty has had a good spring. He got extended playing time because Eduardo Escobar was out at the WBC. Chris, I'm just trying to figure out, if Brett Beatty does make the Mets team, how do they kind of configure all of this? Do they play Brett Beatty at third base? Do they just slide Eduardo Escobar over to DH and kind of use Daniel Vogelbach situationally? What are you thinking there?
All of the above. Beatty, I think, has some experience at corner outfield spots in the minors as well. I know they've worked him out there at least. So, he's someone that, like, if he forces his bat into the lineup, they'll figure it out. And, if Eduardo Escobar has to lose playing time or Dan Vogelbach, like, I don't think that's the worst thing in the world. It all comes down to, like, if Brett Beatty hits enough to make it worth it, it won't really matter. They'll figure it out. And from our perspective, Eduardo Escobar, I don't want to say he has no appeal, and same for Dan Vogelbach, but there are much more deep league options than anything else.
Wow, let's go Mets, huh? Because I just realized I have Max Scherzer, Carlos Carrasco, and David Peterson. Also, my hitters, I mean, I'm really going to be focused in on the Dodgers, the Blue Jays, and the Cardinals. I have multiple hitters on each of those 3 teams. So, all right, well, hope they're good. A couple other picks after Taijuan Walker. Michael Massey goes 1 pick before Scott, and then you are up with Brian.
Yeah.
So another kind of interesting.
Yeah. So, yes, I decided to take 3 bites at the apple in the hopes of landing a breakout third baseman, in part because people left them out there. Brian Hayes, sort of like Alec Boehm, has shown more power this spring. He's always hit the ball hard. He just put it on the ground too much, similarly to Boehm. And this spring, I think he has 3 home runs. So there's still that chance that that maybe he could break through. Obviously, I don't think it's a high percentage chance, but between Brian Hayes, Anthony Rendon, and Josh Young, I think I gave myself a chance of having a pretty good third baseman. And hopefully that can sort itself out early so they don't occupy so much of my roster space. Because right now, I only have 5 healthy starting pitchers, just enough to fill the lineup. I am going to put Tony Gonsolin and Lance McCullers on the IL right away and probably pick up 2 starting pitchers immediately. Probably be a matchup situation. But, it's weird to come out of a head-to-head points draft with only 5 healthy starting pitchers. Definitely not what I'm used to. Meanwhile, I paired Brian Hayes with Scott Barlow here as my second relief pitcher here in the last round. And this is what I'm talking about. I mean, Scott Barlow, we have some doubts about his ability to fend off Aroldis Chapman all season, but he's a perfectly fine closer. And here he is available in the last round because it's a head-to-head points leagues where every team only has, for the whole league, there's only 24 relief pitcher spots to fill. Some are going to put Sparps there. And you just don't have to stress that much about closers, I don't feel like.
All right. Well, after Scott Barlow, we see Graham Ashcraft go off the board. Ryan McMahon, Vaughn Grissom, recently sent down by the Braves, but obviously you could choose to stash him and wait on the upside of a Vaughn Grissom, though he is better in a categories league. After that, Ian Happ, Dre Jameson. We're still waiting to find out if it will be Dre Jameson or Ryan Nelson for the final relievers, final starter spot for the Diamondbacks. Chris, you took Paul Sewald as, I believe, is that your first reliever or second?
That's my second. It's my last pick, so it would have to be my second reliever. I got Emmanuel Clase back in the 6th round, 5th round. So yeah, I think that'll work.
Okay. I'm going to go ahead and so I took Nick Martinez a little bit earlier as a SPARP, and I'm going to go ahead and take his teammate as well. Someone either tweeted at us or emailed us in asking about Seth Lugo, who is going to be in the Padres rotation at least to start the year, and he has relief pitcher eligibility. So I'm just hoping between those two, one of them emerges and is fine. If nothing else, they pitch for a really good team, so maybe they wind up with some wins. What do you think about Seth Lugo? He's looked pretty good so far this spring.
I don't think there's a ton of upside there. I think he'll be worth streaming at times, especially since he is RP eligible. But he's below the threshold of SPARP that I'm interested in, because it just I'd rather have a Scott Barlow level closer, unless it's 2-star week or something. I'd rather have a Scott Barlow level closer in that RP spot.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see if Seth Lugo can get back to being a multi-inning pitcher, because he hasn't really done that he kind of did in 2020. He had 36 innings and 16 appearances, 7 of them starts, but you really have to go back to 2018. So it's going to be interesting because he's been a very good reliever, obviously, for the most part outside of 2020, the 1 year he was used in multi-inning roles. He's been very good. So, he's an interesting pitcher. I do tend to be intrigued by the idea of guys who go to the bullpen, see a big jump in stuff, and then come back to the rotation. I always think that's an interesting profile, but obviously it's the kind of situation where if he makes one start, goes 2 innings and doesn't look good, you can just drop him in this league.
In Seth Lugo's most recent spring start, he did go 4 innings, only threw 26 pitches. So that was just incredibly efficient. Going up against the Oakland A's, I guess that'll happen. But yeah, we've got to see that pitch count get up a little bit. If not, then maybe we're talking about some kind of piggyback situation with Seth Lugo. If he doesn't build up before the season starts, I'll probably just wind up dropping him. But for now, got him and Nick Martinez as my second relief pitcher spot to go along with Kenley Jansen, who is my RP1. After I took Seth Lugo, Spencer Torkelson, Marcell Ozuna, and Brady Singer. I mean, I know we don't really get it with Brady Singer, but pick 251, final round of the draft.
He was obviously the best pitcher left.
Yeah, why not? And
there are some other decent ones. I think I'll have a nice selection off the waiver wire once I on the colors and Gonsolin.
And we end the draft with an auto draft. David Robertson is mystery relevant. Could turn out to be very relevant, but a job well done. Give yourself a round of applause to the listeners who participated in this draft. Fun draft. I think they gobbled up a lot of the players that we like, which normally happens in a format like this. But again, a 12-team head-to-head points league, a lot of fun. It took me about 2 hours to mention this, but we should probably give last year's champion some credit. Do you guys remember who it was?
It was Frank Stampfl.
This league doesn't really even count, so
Did this person not want David Robertson?
He wanted Craig Kimbrell, so I'm just fixing that.
Oh, all right. So
Craig Kimbrell's Mr. Irrelevant, not David Robertson.
Forget everything I said about David Robertson. Craig Kimbrell, last pick of the draft. Give yourself a round of applause. And yes, congratulations to our winner from last year. His name is Frank Stampfl. Let's go through each of our teams real quick, and then we'll wrap this bad boy up. Thank you for those still out here watching us late on a Tuesday night, 2 hours into the live stream. And we'll start off with Scott's team, drafting first overall. JT Realmuto at catcher, followed by Paul Goldschmidt, Jonathan India, Anthony Rendon, Dansby Swanson, Aaron Judge, Taylor Ward, Corbin Carroll, and Shohei Ohtani as the hitters. Slide over to the pitchers. We've got Chris Sale, Robbie Ray, Zach Gallen, Joe Ryan, and George Kirby. The relief pitchers, Felix Bautista and Scott Barlow. On the bench, Lance McCullers, Key Brian Hayes, Tony Gonsolin, Josh Young, and Anthony Volpe. So lots of upside on the bench here, Scott. 2 injured players in McCullers and Gonsolin. You triple tapped third base late, just hoping that you could find somebody who goes into that spot.
Yep. Once again, didn't work out. Didn't work out. Picking first overall.
How do you feel about it? How do you feel about the way it turned out? You know, waiting on second and third base. I mean, India was great value. What do you think of the team?
Well, hypothetically, I mean, if India's who he was last year wasn't such a great value, I didn't build, like, I don't think I was able to optimize value up and down my lineup. Like, I think I was forced to take some deeper positions earlier rather than the scarcer positions I would have liked to take, like third base. And for a format this shallow, I'd consider second base one of the scarcer positions because obviously there's a higher standard that you have to meet to measure up to your competition. So, you know, Goldschmidt and Ohtani, a DH and a first baseman with my second and third picks, not optimal. And for not taking my starting pitcher, my first starting pitcher until round 6, I went Zach Gallen and Robbie Ray at the 6-7 turn. For waiting that long to take a starting pitcher, I wish my starting lineup looked stronger. I'm not saying it looks weak. It doesn't. Especially when, my utility player's Ohtani. That you can't ask for a better one than that. That kind of helps to make it better. Obviously, I got the best catcher in JT Realmuto. I think, the best overall player in Aaron Judge. But I look at India at second base and Anthony Rendon at third base out of 2 out of 9 hitter spots and think, that could go really poorly for me. I am happy with the way I was able to mitigate the risk there by getting Josh Young and Kibrian Hayes. Fingers crossed one of the three, them or Rendon, turns out to be a top 10-ish third baseman. I think it's possible in all 3 cases. It's possible they could maybe even be more than that. But it's not the degree of comfort I'm looking for at that position in a league this shallow. I also like that I got Anthony Volpe. Anthony Volpe, I feel like if he does make the Yankees roster, if he doesn't, it's going to be hard to hold on to him. But if he does make the Yankees roster, he's going to be pretty close to must start. It's hard to say that about a 20-year-old rookie, but he's just so disciplined and contributes in so many ways that I think I'm willing to say that about Anthony Volpe. So that might have been my favorite pick of the draft. And I'm almost hoping it's a situation where he plays more second base instead of shortstop so that I have the India insurance in addition to the Swanson insurance at shortstop because he comes in. Volpe comes in with shortstop eligibility already. The weirdest thing about my team is, like I said, only 5 active starting pitchers. Gonsolin and McCullers are going to begin the year on the IL. It is kind of 6, though, right? Because if I really get in a bad spot, I can shift Ohtani over, stick one of those bats in the utility spot. Not what I'm looking to do, but it is there as an emergency measure should I find myself with an emergency situation.
Scott, in hindsight, you know, we kept talking about William Contreras and Gabriel Moreno, those 2 lasting so late into the draft. Would you have rather waited at catcher? And I just look back at the results. At the 4-5 turn, you had an opportunity to draft Jazz Chisholm. I know that typically you're not on Chisholm this year, but, you know, a more proven or I guess upside-y type second baseman compared to India. Is that something that you would have done differently in hindsight?
No, I don't think so. I do find Jazz Chisholm very risky. I don't find Realmuto that risky. Mm-hmm. And I wanted a game changer with that early pick. I think Realmuto is a game changer. In this format, I think Rushman is the only real threat to Realmuto's number 1 overall status. And of course, it takes Rushman taking a step forward. So, yeah, I love the late catcher values for William Contreras especially, but it ultimately comes down to I didn't like my alternatives at the point I picked Real Muto. I'm not wild about taking Real Muto in a one catcher league, but it was at the 4 or 5 turn, and I wasn't wild about much of anyone else there either.
All right. Well, let's slide over to Chris's team, who was drafting 7th overall in this draft and got Gabriel Moreno as his catcher, followed by Matt Olson at first base, Marcus Semien, Gunnar Henderson, Fernando Tatis, Giancarlo Stanton, Tyler O'Neill, and Ronald Acuna in the outfield, Ezekiel Tovar at utility. So you can slide him over to shortstop while you wait for Fernando Tatis.
Yep, I've already done that.
Yep. And then in the pitching staff, you've got Tristan McKenzie, Shane Bieber, Hunter Green, Kyle Wright, and Pablo Lopez. The relievers, Emmanuel Clase and Paul Sewald. On the bench, Jurickson Profar, Tyler Anderson, Rowanzi Contreras, Trevor Rogers, and Seiya Suzuki. You mentioned during the draft, Chris, that this was a FOMO type draft where you were just taking players that you haven't drafted yet and just have this fear that they're going to go off this year. How do you think it turned out?
I'm really happy with this team. I think the offense is incredibly strong pretty much everywhere. The only problem, obviously, is when Fernando Tatis is out, and then there are some question marks between Tyler O'Neill and Giancarlo Stanton in outfield, although I think, Seiya Suzuki, if he can get back quickly, he was someone that I had in my initial breakouts column. I do think there's another step he can take. So I feel pretty good that I'm going to have 3 good outfielders. I feel pretty good about every spot in my lineup except for catcher, probably with Gabriel Moreno. But even there, I think there's a lot of upside, as we talked about, with Carson Kelly suffering a fractured forearm. Pitching is not the strongest staff that I've ever put together, but, with Bieber and McKenzie and Kyle Wright, I think I've got 3 guys I feel pretty good about, the quality of innings that I'm going to get. Hunter Green has a lot of upside, obviously, and Pablo Lopez, one of my favorite late breakout candidates. So I'm pretty happy with this squad. There were a few spots where, if I went back through the draft, I might prefer to take one guy over another, maybe passing on Emmanuel Clase and getting another pitcher is one, but all in all, I'm pretty happy with the squad.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty fun team as well. We'll wrap up with mine. I drafted right behind Chris at 8th overall and wound up with Will Smith as my catcher, followed by Vladimir Guerrero Jr., Tommy Edman, Max Muncy, Trey Turner. In the outfield, I've got George Springer, Adolis Garcia, and Lars Nootbaar, Rowdy Tellez at utility. Spent a little bit more on pitching than the rest of these guys. Got Max Scherzer, Kevin Gausman, Joe Musgrove, who will likely miss the first 1 or 2 starts of the season, Jeffrey Springs, and Drew Rasmussen, 2 of my 2 Tampa Bay pitchers that I've been drafting quite a bit. Relievers, I've got Kenley Jansen and Nick Martinez as a SPARP. And then on the bench, I loaded all up on pitching. Carlos Carrasco, John Gray, Seth Lugo, who's a SPARP, David Peterson, hoping he wins the Mets' 5th starter job, and Kyle Bradish. First thing I noticed, and I think it's no surprise, the offense is not nearly as good as you guys. I don't think that there's necessarily a hole. I still like it.
I like your offense considering you invested heaviest in pitching. I don't think there's a hole, like you were saying.
Yep.
And I think you got upside in the areas where you were weak.
Yeah, I mean, specifically in the outfielder, I kind of waited a little bit. Adolis Garcia just lasted so late into the draft. Happy to do that. Lars Nootbaar, look, I was happy with the pick. It was a get your guys pick. I took him a little bit early, but I'm still just thinking about passing on Luis Severino for Lars Nootbaar. Severino would have been my SP4. I don't know how that's going to turn out. I might regret doing that. And there was a lot of really interesting outfielders later on too. So we'll see.
A strong staff, though. I mean, even passing up Luis Severino, like I said, you went heaviest on starting pitcher. I think you had 2 before Chris or before either of us took 1. You already had 2, Frank. So you definitely made the strongest investment in pitching, and so I think you can forgive yourself for that. I think Nootbaar rounds out your team nicely.
Yeah.
If it comes through with the playing time and with the performance, which is of course a big if, but we all like the upside there. So I think it was a good job. I don't know if you brought up Severino's performance when that happened. So he's had a terrible spring, serving up tons of home runs, but he bounced back very strong in this latest start. I think he allowed a home run in the first inning, but his slider looked crisp. And
yeah, it's interesting.
I think he's going to be fine.
He's remember last year he was throwing that cutter. I don't think he's thrown that at all this spring. He's gone back to just fastball, slider, and changeup, which was partially a change he made towards the stretch run last year as well. But it's that's interesting because the slider's obviously been his money pitch.
And I had a tweet early on Tuesday because the first pitch that he served up, or not first pitch, but first batter he faced, Kerry Carpenter blasted a home run to right field. And I tweet out, oh, well, here we go again. It's been kind of a rough spring for Severino. Then he settles down, winds up with
9 strikeouts. Yeah.
9 strikeouts. And I think he got a slider 38% in this start. Someone tagged me in a tweet that apparently he was just purposely working on that slider. So, maybe some of them got hit a little bit hard, but just a reminder that with some veteran guys, they're working on stuff. They're throwing new pitches. They're throwing a lot of the same pitch over and over to get a good feel for it. So I think that's just a good reminder with Luis Severino, and I think he'll be fine.
And after his last start, I guess he was asked about all the home runs he was allowed. And he was like, and he basically laughed it off and said it won't be like that during the regular season. So
yeah,
if hopefully this latest spring start will alleviate any concerns people may have had about him, at least performance wise. Not
there's still innings concerns for sure.
I'll tell you what, Scott, it's not easing my concern right now because I'm a little bit upset that I passed on Luis Severino, but we'll see what happens. I think it's going to be a fun season and a really fun league. Again, that was our 12-team head-to-head points listener league, and we are going to wrap there. For Scott and Chris, I am Frank. Thanks, as always, for watching and listening Fantasy Baseball today. Please make sure to follow and leave a 5-star rating on Apple or Spotify. We'll be back again tomorrow. Bye-bye.